Warrior Lore. Chapter 21-26. But at this moment, a familiar figure slowly flew up from the ground. Compared to Xiaohua, that flying speed was like a baby learning to walk. Once that person flew into the air, he waved his hands and shouted. Unfortunately, this person didn't make any sound, only a muted "ya-ya" sound. Needless to say, this person was Zhong Haoran. Xiaohua frowned. He made Zhong Haoran swear a hard oath that he absolutely couldn't reveal the matter of him giving him the sky-mending pill. Now that Zhong Haoran came out, if it weren't for the fact that he couldn't speak, he probably would have shouted the matter out long ago. Zhong Haoran, what are you doing? However, Xiaohua thought of Zhong Haoran's infatuation and still asked in a low voice, "Don't forget your hard oath." Zhong Haoran bent his knees slightly, but he couldn't kneel in the air. With a sincere face, he took out a jade slip and respectfully presented it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua took it, but didn't look at it. Instead, he scanned it with his spiritual will and Buddhist awareness. He saw that among the many foundation establishment cultivators clustered around Zhong Tianyao, Zhong Yuehan was also among them. However, Zhong Yuehan and several other female cultivators were protected by many male cultivators. Xiaohua looked at Zhong Haoran's jade slip and pondered whether he should open Zhong Haoran's mute acupoint. Zhong Haoran fell again. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he knelt on the ground and actually kowtowed again. "Zhong Haoran, you..." Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "You're actually not afraid of your hard oath and risked it to plead for your family's head. Do you know how your family's head treated me that day?" Zhong Haoran was startled. Now, no one cared about him. He only knew that Xiaohua and Zhongling Mountain Villa had bad blood, but he really didn't know the specific situation. But the problem was that he knew Xiaohua's ability. A cultivator who could take out the sky-mending pill absolutely had the confidence to cure the nether bat's poison. Even if it couldn't be cured, it was also possible to protect Zhong Tianyao's life. Once Xiaohua flew away, Zhong Tianyao would probably die immediately. Zhong Haoran was only startled for a moment. He hurriedly took out a jade slip, wrote a few words, and respectfully presented it above his head. Xiaohua gestured with his hand, probed, and sneered, "Zhong Haoran, although you and I have met once before, you shouldn't take this friendship too seriously." Although Zhong Tianyao did not manage to injure this Xiao in the slightest, that was because this Xiao had the strength to do so. If not for this Xiao having some tricks up his sleeve, I would have probably been killed by him long ago, right? Now that you want me to save you, don't you think you're dreaming? Bang, bang, bang. Zhong Haoran didn't dare to say anything else and hurriedly kowtowed. Xiaohua did not transmit his last words through sound transmission. Everyone in Zhongling Mountain Villa heard it clearly. Zhong Peiyuan, Zhong Peifu, Zhong Yejing, and the others felt their hearts beating wildly. Zhong Peiyuan glanced at Zhong Peifu, and without hesitation, he was the first to land on the ground. He bent his knees and knelt on the ground, shouting, "Senior Xiao, it was all this junior's fault. Junior kowtows to senior. Please save my Zhong clan's patriarch." Zhong Peiyuan's actions immediately woke everyone up. A few people helped Zhong Tianyao to the ground, and everyone knelt on the ground and kowtowed. "Senior Xiao, please save my Zhongling Mountain Villa." How could a Zhongling Mountain Villa without Zhong Tianyao be a match for Fan City's Qing clan? If Xiaohua didn't make a move, after today, there would be no Zhong clan in Yun City. Xiaohua was not moved by this. Instead, he looked at Zhong Haoran who was kowtowing on the ground, and he fell into deep thought. If it wasn't for the oath, Xiaohua might not have bothered with him. However, Zhong Haoran was willing to break the oath for the sake of the Zhong clan. This kind of righteousness, Xiaohua couldn't ignore it. If there were many righteous people like Zhong Haoran in this world, there wouldn't be chaos in this world. This Xiao is testing Zhong Haoran here, but isn't this also a test from the heavens? Xiaohua sighed in his heart. Suddenly, his heart moved, and he raised his voice. "Wait for me. Let me say this first. This Xiao doesn't know if I can save your patriarch. However, if you want this Xiao to make a move, you must promise this Xiao two things first. Remember, whether this Xiao can save Zhong Tianyao or not, you must promise these two things." "Senior Xiao, please speak," Zhong Peifu asked without hesitation. Let's talk about the first thing first. Xiao Hua nodded, and then transmitted his voice to Zhong Peifu. He looked at Zhong Peifu again, and there was some hesitation on his face. However, he turned to look at the already unconscious Zhong Tianyao, and immediately said, "What Senior Xiao said, this junior agrees. Senior, please instruct the second thing." Good. Xiao Hua clapped his hands, took out a medicinal pill, and threw it to Zhong Tianyao, saying, "Take this antidote pill first. The second thing is very easy. We'll talk about it after saving Zhong Tianyao." Yes, Zhong Peifu was overjoyed, and took the antidote pill. He looked at the ugly medicinal pill without any medicinal fragrance, then turned and ran to Zhong Tianyao. The antidote pill entered Zhong Tianyao's mouth. Immediately, an extremely foul smell spread out from Zhong Tianyao's mouth, causing all the Foundation establishment cultivators to frown slightly. Xiao Hua released his divine sense and locked onto Zhong Tianyao. After a moment, he nodded and said, "Zhong Peiyuan, bring your family's patriarch back to the inner room. Wait for him to wake up, then come out and talk." Yes, yes, yes. Zhong Peiyuan saw that Xiao Hua was so confident and had long been happy. He didn't dare to be negligent. He supported the still unconscious Zhong Tianyao and ran into the inner room. "Wait for me." Xiao Hua raised his hand and said. But how could anyone dare to get up? They looked at Xiao Hua pitifully. At this time, many low-level Zhong family disciples, as well as family members who didn't know how to cultivate, also knew the cause of this matter. They all gathered and kowtowed, hoping that Xiao Hua could save Zhong Tianyao and wake him up. "Sai, if you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place?" Xiao Hua sighed, and when these words left his mouth, it was like a bolt of lightning. A strange, crisp sound seemed to have been heard somewhere before, and a sentence appeared in his mind. "If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place?" Strange. Xiao Hua scratched his head. He wanted to search carefully, but there was no news. "You all can rest assured. Since I've agreed to help, I'll definitely do my best." Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the dozens of people closest to him couldn't help but stand up. As for Zhong Haoran, he slowly retreated and gradually mixed in with a group of aura-refining disciples. Xiao Hua saw this clearly, and a trace of spirit appeared in his eyes. Following these disciples, the other disciples also gradually stood up. Zhong Peifu glanced at Zhong Yejing, and the two of them stepped forward. Zhong Yejing smiled apologetically and said, "Senior Xiao, please serve us tea in the inner room." "Oh," Xiao Hua nodded and said with a smile, "Has the inner room been repaired?" Zhong Peifu's face was slightly red, and he also smiled apologetically and said, "Senior must be joking. Please." Hee. Good. Xiao Hua descended from the air and followed the two of them to a rather large hall. Xiao Hua looked at the seat of honor, and his eyes wandered around. He couldn't help but be slightly surprised and said inwardly, "This young master didn't feel it when I was in the country of Shi, but how come in Ming country, whether it's a cultivation sect or a cultivation family, this hall is so big? How come they all have some ancient inheritance ruins? Moreover, inside this Zhong family's ancestral hall, there is actually a secret refining method left behind from ancient times. Could it be that there are many ancient ruins in Ming country? Or perhaps these cultivation families and sects were built based on these ancient ruins?" "Senior, please have some tea." Zhong Yejing respectfully offered the spiritual tea and said. And Xiao Hua picked up the spiritual tea, took a few shallow sips, and then put it down. Zhong Yejing again said, "This junior really deserves to die. This junior clearly knows that senior has a noble character, but unexpectedly I still doubted senior's conduct. If this junior had tried to dissuade senior, I'm afraid there wouldn't be such a misunderstanding." "It's fine," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Your family's head is so suspicious of me, there must be a reason. Tell me the whole story." "Yes." Zhong Yejing nodded and explained everything. Finally, she said, "I don't blame the family head. It's really too much of a coincidence. All of these actions, no matter how you look at it, it's all Senior Zhao's doing." Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That's right, he went out together with the nether bat. The nether bat is good at hiding and can even escape through the earth. No wonder Zhong Tianyao would use such a vicious method to deal with him. Everything was a misunderstanding. After understanding everything, the grudge in Xiao Hua's heart disappeared. He waved his hand and said, "Forget it, forget it. Since I know it's a misunderstanding, this Xiao will not pursue anything. Your Zhong family's refining method can't be seen in vain. This Xiao will see if he can help you." Ah, Senior Xiao also knows how to refine? Zhong Peifu was overjoyed. I know a little. Xiao Hua nodded. This Xiao originally wanted to repair the magic treasure by himself, so I might as well repair it in your Zhongling villa. Thank you, Senior Xiao. Zhong Yejing also bowed, but then said hesitantly, "But the materials that my Zhong family has been searching for many years have already been taken away. This Xiao has some here. If it's possible, you can use them. If it's not possible, then don't blame this Xiao." Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Right? This Xiao heard that the Changbai sect's disciples came to take away the materials by force." "That's right," Zhong Peifu said with a sigh. "It's because of that guy's evil deeds that this junior judged others and thought that senior would also do the same evil deeds." "Tell me about it," Xiao Hua said. Zhong Peifu naturally didn't hide it from Xiao Hua and told him the ins and outs of the matter. As it turned out, the Zhong family didn't have many materials to repair their ancestral magic treasures, but there were many varieties, especially materials like the Qian and Mo secret stone, which were even rarer. Just before Xiao Hua came, the Zhong family had gathered all the materials with great difficulty. Just as they were about to make preparations, the Changbai sect's golden core cultivator, Hu Guanfeng, came to the Zhongling villa. As soon as Hu Guanfeng entered, he directly took out a storage pouch and asked Zhong Tianyao to exchange the few precious materials that the Zhong family had spent hundreds of years searching for. This magic treasure was related to the fate of the Zhong family's disciples, so how could Zhong Tianyao take it out so easily? After some persuasion, Hu Guanfeng became angry. When Zhong Peiyuan gave an inappropriate answer, he said that if Zhong Tianyao didn't agree to the exchange, he would immediately kill the entire Zhongling villa. Zhong Tianyao was helpless. After all, Hu Guanfeng was also a golden core cultivator and a disciple of the Changbai sect. Under such circumstances, he had no choice but to submit and give his several hundred years of hard work to Hu Guanfeng. -8. Chapter 21-27. Alas, then Senior Xiao came. Zhong Peifu sighed. Clanhead and third brother were in a fit of anger, so, haha, Hu Guanmu and Zhong Tianyao are both gold core cultivators, and they're in the Zhong clan's territory. What's there to be afraid of? Xiao Hua smiled. Think about how you treated me that day. Senior Xiao, you don't know. Hu Guanmu is different from Senior. Zhong Peifu smiled bitterly. Hu Guanmu is a gold core cultivator. Clan head doesn't have the confidence to kill him. Besides, since Hu Guanmu came after hearing the news, someone must have instructed him. That person must know that he came to our Zhong clan. If he disappears, our Zhong clan won't be able to escape responsibility. Moreover, Hu Guanmu is a Meng cultivator. We all know his master. It's the famous nascent soul cultivator of the Changbai sect, Reverend Jingru. Do you think we would dare to act rashly? Reverend Jingru? Xiao Hua shook his head. I've never heard of this name before. However, I've seen Senior Li Tsangqing of the Changbai sect. That senior looks very arrogant. He also practices flying swords. I'm afraid he has a good character. Zhong Peifu shook his head and smiled apologetically. I've also heard of Senior Li's reputation. However, this Senior Jing Ran is somewhat protective of his disciples. This Hu Guanmu is his personal disciple. If anything happens to him, my Zhong clan will definitely be exterminated. Protective? Xiao Hua's heart jumped for no reason. He suddenly thought of Yin Yu. If not for Yin Wei, how could Yin Yu chase after Xiao Hua? How could he die in Xiao Hua's hands? Strange. Why did I suddenly think of this? Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. Just as he was about to think carefully, Zhong Peifu smiled apologetically again. Senior mentioned two things just now. Third brother has already agreed to the first matter. Although I don't know what it is, it involves the life and death of clan head. My Zhong clan has no reason to not agree. Senior Xiao, please tell me the second matter so that I can make early plans. Haha, Xiaohua collected his thoughts and nodded. It's good that you have such thoughts. If you had thought about it earlier, how could there be so much trouble? As he spoke, Xiaohua removed the storage pouch from his waist and passed it to Zhong Peifu before he said with a smile, the second matter is extremely simple. However, it requires an extremely large number of people from your Zhongling villa to accomplish it. Oh? Zhong Peifu was very puzzled. He reached out and took the storage bag. After scanning it with his divine sense, he was even more puzzled. He raised his head and asked, Senior Xiao, why are you giving me so much rice? Zhong Yejing, who was standing at the side, was shocked. She hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. Senior Xiao, this junior understands senior's intention. This rice should be one of those good seeds. Do you want my Zhongling Mountain Villa's disciples to help Senior Xiao distribute it to the people of Ming Nation? Xiaohua nodded. This Xiao was thinking the same thing. After all, I'm all alone, and my power is limited. If the Zhong family of Zhongling Mountain Village helps, at least the mortals near Yun City won't starve to death. Great. At this moment, Zhong Peifu knew that what Zhong Yejing said about Xiaohua's actions along the way was true. He clapped his hands and said, This junior now knows that Senior Xiao cares about the world. Senior Zhao's cultivation is the blessing of the cultivators of my Xiaoyu continent, and also the blessing of the common people. This junior will distribute this rice to the people near Yun City, and will spread Senior Zhao's name like this good seed to the ears of the common people. There's no need to make such a big fuss. This is also your Zhongling Mountain Villa's contribution. Xiaohua waved his hand. Then, he raised his head again and said with a smile, It seems that this Xiao didn't disappoint you. Sure enough, outside the palace, Zhong Tianyao had already walked in. He was wearing a new Taoist robe. Although his face was a little gloomy, his spirit was still okay. However, on the surface, even if the poison of the nether bat was not completely removed, his life was still in good condition. Zhong Tianyao quickly stepped forward and bowed. This Zhong is untalented. It's really fellow Taoist Zhao's fault. This Zhong thanks fellow Taoist for saving my life again. Xiaohua also hurriedly got up and supported him. He said with a smile, Everything is a misunderstanding. Since the misunderstanding has already been cleared, fellow Taoist Zhong doesn't need to say any more words. Besides, this Xiao didn't save you for nothing. Zhong Tianyao forced a smile and sat on the main seat. He shook his head and said, It's all this old man's fault. I misunderstood fellow Taoist's good intentions. Just now, third brother has already told this old man. Isn't it just the ancient refining method under the ancestral hall? Fellow Taoist Xiao, feel free to take a look. Anyway, fellow Taoist Xiao can't take it away. In the future, it will still belong to my Zhong family. Oh, Zhong Peifu and Zhong Yejing seem to have already expected this. At this time, they weren't surprised when they heard it. Moreover, Zhong Peifu even said with a smile, Family head, why do you have to do this? Fellow Taoist Xiao even promised that if possible, he's willing to take out his own materials and even help my Zhong family refine magic tools. Really? Zhong Tianyao was really surprised. Just as he was about to get up and salute, he sighed and said, Forget it, fellow Taoist Xiao, great kindness can't be thanked with words. My Zhong family has received so many favors from you. No matter how much this old man thanks you, I can't express my gratitude. As for the second matter, even if you want this old man to give up the position of Zhong family head, this old man is also willing to do it. This old fox. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was obviously an impossible matter. Zhong Yejing hurriedly went up and said the second matter. Zhong Tianyao and Zhong Peiyuan were just as surprised as Zhong Peifu. Zhong Tianyao said, Second brother has already agreed. His words are my words. When this old man recovers and the situation in Zhongling Villa stabilizes, this old man will immediately take care of this matter. Family head is taking this matter too seriously. Zhong Yejing hurriedly said with a smile, This kind of matter can be done as long as it's a low-level disciple of the Zhong family. Even disciples who don't cultivate can do it. They aren't the targets of Qin Kai and the others. Family head knows that if this kind of person is sent to Yun City, the secular disciples of Yun City will be able to finish this matter very well. Of course. Zhong Tianyao slapped his forehead and said, this old man wanted to personally supervise this matter and neglected the secular disciples. This kind of matter is just right for them to do. Jinger, you arrange this matter right now. You must complete it perfectly. Yes, Jinger understands. Zhong Yejing took the storage pouch handed over by Zhong Peifu and quickly walked out. She had already made up her mind to plant Xiao Hua's good name in the hearts of the common people through this matter. Zhong Yejing obviously had good intentions, but when Zhong Yejing's figure walked out of the palace, Xiao Hua took a sip of spirit tea and said with a smile, fellow Taoist Zhong, has your nether bat's poison been cured? I'll let fellow Taoist Xiao know that fellow Taoist's detoxification pill is indeed useful. Zhong Tianyao nodded and said, more than half of the poison in this Zhong's body has been cured. There's still a small part that's a bit troublesome. However, fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to worry. This Zhong will slowly refine this poison with true essence. Ha ha ha, Xiao Hua shook his head and said, fellow Taoist Zhong still doesn't know how powerful the nether bat's poison is. This poison can seep into the soul. If you can use your true essence to refine this poison, why would Qingkai poison you with it? -8. Chapter 21-28. Then, Zhong Tianyao was in a difficult position. He had only heard of the legendary nether bat. How could he know that this poison actually went deep into the soul? Forget it. I happen to know an ancient detoxification technique. I can try it on fellow Zhong, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Zhong Tianyao was overjoyed once more. He clasped his hands and said, then, fellow Taoist, please follow this Zhong to my Zhong family's ancestral hall. We'll study the ancient artifact refinement arts together, and this Zhong will experience fellow Taoist Zhao's ancient detoxification method again. Seeing that Zhong Tianyao was so tactful, Xiao Hua smiled and said, that's great. However, I still have to go out and bring my wife to Zhongling Mountain Villa first. Okay, I will wait here for Miss Shui. Zhong Tianyao cupped his hands and said, I have offended you before. I will definitely apologize in person. Xiao Hua smiled and turned to fly out of Zhongling Mountain Villa. Not long after, he came back hand in hand with Shui Shui. Seeing Shui Shui, Zhong Tianyao and the others naturally bowed and apologized. Shui Shui was also generous and respectfully returned the greeting. Then, the two were invited into the Zhong family's ancestral hall by Zhong Tianyao. Zhong Tianyao was guarding at all times. Even if Xiao Hua killed the Zhong family's disciples, he would not leave easily. The Zhong family's ancestral hall was a few low wooden houses. It was located among the rows of buildings in Zhongling Mountain Villa. It was as simple and shabby as Shang Huaming's ancestral hall. It was quite out of place. When Xiao Hua and Zhong Tianyao pushed open the door and entered, they saw that there were many incense sticks and candles inside, as well as many black wooden signs. On the signs, there were some golden words. From top to bottom, from left to right, the entire wooden house was lined up. Cough, cough, Zhong Tianyao coughed twice and said with some pride, my Zhong family has been passed down since ancient times. During this period, I don't know how many times it has been destroyed. These are the famous ancestors of my Zhong family in the recent thousands of years. Of course, compared to the Imperial Thunder sect, my Zhong family is still too small. It's already very good, Xiao Hua said with a smile. To be passed down since ancient times, this is no small matter. However, I am a little curious. Since fellow Zhong knows that the Zhong family has been passed down since ancient times, why are there no records of it? Sigh. Zhong Tianyao sighed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, look at today. If fellow Taoist wasn't here, my Zhong clan would probably have been exterminated. Who knows when my Zhong clan would be revived again? What fellow Taoist Xiao is seeing now, will it still exist when that day comes? This Xiao understands. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. Of course, I didn't expect my Zhong family's heritage to be so profound until I discovered the ancient refining method under the ancestral hall. A trace of excitement appeared on Zhong Tianyao's face. Only now did this Zhong know that the origins of my Zhong family can actually be traced back to ancient times. Hee. So fellow Taoist Zhong started to refine artifacts. Xiao Hua chuckled. How many years ago was that? Well, it was a few decades ago. Zhong Tianyao wasn't interested in calculating numbers. He brought Xiaohua and Shui to the side of the ancestral hall and came to a corner. He took out a magic tool that looked like a sickle from his storage pouch and turned to Zhong Peifu. Inscribe the spell that this old man taught you here. Yes, Zhong Peifu nodded and activated his transcendence energy. A few seemingly cryptic seals struck the artifact, and the artifact emitted balls of green brilliance, fluttering like fireflies. Zhong Tianyao waved his sickle, and balls of green light landed around everyone in an extremely orderly manner. When all the green light dissipated, the space near the green light rippled, emitting a strange fluctuation of spiritual energy. This fluctuation rotated like a whirlwind, bringing everyone underground. When Xiaohua's vision darkened, it immediately lit up again. When Xiaohua opened his eyes, good heavens, when Xiaohua saw the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but widen his eyes and shake his head inwardly. Shang Huoming's ancestral hall was admittedly a cave, but compared to this space, it was simply a small thatched cottage. And below this ancestral hall was simply a palace. An underground palace. A gigantic underground palace. Inside this palace, whether it was the pillars, chairs, decorations, etc., they were all several times larger than what they usually saw. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over, but all the walls and so on were isolated from divine sense. Xiaohua couldn't see clearly. No wonder this young master couldn't find this place. Xiaohua curled his lips. If it weren't for old Ghost Zhong leading the way, this young master probably wouldn't have been able to enter. Zhong Tianyao looked around inside. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't look at how splendid this palace is. It's just a facade. This old man has long been clear that apart from some stone chairs and stone tables, there's nothing else. To be honest, it's just a gigantic space. If this old man hadn't found a dozen or so stone walls inscribed with ancient characters in the innermost part of the palace, this old man would have suspected that he was happy for nothing. Ancient characters? Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously, these ancient characters, fellow Taoist Zhong can understand them? Hee. Zhong Tianyao clapped his hands and took out a jade slip. He smiled and said, if my Zhong family's patriarch didn't pass down this item, how could this old man understand it? Is that so? Xiaohua reached out and took it, but didn't look at it. Instead, he smiled and said, this is the Zhong family's inheritance. It's not suitable for this Xiao to look at it, right? It's fine. Since this Zhong has already promised fellow Taoist Xiao to comprehend the refining method, if I don't look at this item, how can I comprehend it? Zhong Tianyao waved his hand. All right. Xiaohua nodded and put the jade slip into his bosom. He said, fellow Taoist Zhong is so sincere. This Xiao will kindly accept it. However, fellow Taoist Zhong's poison can't be delayed any longer. This Xiao will first detoxify fellow Taoist. Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoist Xiao. Zhong Tianyao nodded and thanked him without any surprise. Thus, Xiaohua arranged for Zhong Tianyao to sit on a stone chair and use the green python's poison and the method of fighting poison with poison to detoxify Zhong Tianyao. However, that nether bat's poison was indeed powerful. Xiaohua estimated that he would need to use 9 drops of green python's poison in succession to completely detoxify the poison. While detoxifying the poison, Xiaohua took a look at the Zhong family's jade slip. To Xiaohua's surprise, this jade slip recorded the inscription of armor. It was a supplement to the inscription of armor that Huangyi remembered. Seeing this, Xiaohua was very happy. After 9 days, Xiaohua understood all of the inscription of armor, and Zhong Tianyao's poison could be considered to have been completely eradicated. Zhong Tianyao's gratitude was self-evident, but he was even more moved by Xiaohua's aptitude. He himself knew that he had used dozens of years of effort to understand these ancient characters. Xiaohua had completely comprehended them in just a few short days, which really made him feel ashamed of his inferiority. Soon after, under Zhong Tianyao's lead, Xiaohua finally arrived at the deepest part of the palace. Everything here was already in tatters, and even incomplete. Dozens of tall stone walls stood there, and the large inscription of armor on them were also damaged. There were many places that were blurred. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this is the ancient refining method. Zhong Tianyao looked at these stone walls, and his eyes flashed with a trace of divine light. He said proudly, to tell fellow Taoists the truth, this old man also wants to rely on this refining method to raise my Zhong family from a cultivation family to a cultivation sect. Haha, Xiao Hua looked at the first stone wall and said absent-mindedly, this burden is too heavy. Fellow Taoist Zhong should be mentally prepared. Speaking until here, Xiao Hua's face revealed a shocked expression. Then, his eyes no longer looked at the stone wall, and he sat cross-legged, his palms facing the sky, and closed his eyes to meditate. Xiao. Zhong Tianyao was slightly stunned. He was just about to call out to Xiao Hua, but looking at Xiao Hua's appearance, he immediately understood that Xiao Hua had comprehended something. He looked at the stone wall that he had already seen countless times, and the inscription of armor was still there. Where was there anything to comprehend? Zhong Tianyao and the others didn't dare to disturb Xiao Hua's meditation, and all of them tiptoed out of the depths of the palace. Then, Zhong Tianyao left Zhong Peifu to accompany Xue Xue in the palace, and he brought Zhong Peiyuan out of the ancestral hall. After all, Zhongling Mountain Villa had such a big commotion, and he was still afraid of Qin Kai's actions. However, more than a month passed in a flash, and it was a moonless night. Zhong Tianyao was ready for battle, but Qin Kai's nether bat didn't appear at all. This wasn't out of Zhong Tianyao's expectations. Since Zhong Tianyao already knew about the nether bat naturally couldn't get close so easily, and Qin Kai was also afraid of the Zhong family's counterattack, so he must be making preparations in Fan City. It was a calm month for Zhong Tianyao, but it wasn't for Xiao Hua. The reason why Xiao Hua had comprehended something was because of the 4 large inscriptions on the rightmost side of the first stone wall. These 4 inscriptions were none other than weapon refining the world. When Xiao Hua saw these 4 inscriptions, a mass of text immediately gushed out from his mind. Xiao Hua was pleasantly surprised, and he hurriedly closed his eyes to recall. The words were also weapon refining the world, but it was the weapon refining the world in Xiao Hua's memory. Whether the content was the same as the one in front of him, Xiao Hua didn't have the mind to know for the time being. It wasn't until 15 days later that Xiao Hua laughed and stood up. In these 15 days, not only did he recall the contents of weapon refining the world, but he also reviewed the refining techniques within it. Xue Xue and Zhong Peifu heard Xiao Hua's voice and rushed over. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Fellow Zhong, this Xiao suddenly had some comprehension. I've caused you to worry." Hehe, no matter. Senior Zhao's cultivation has improved. This junior is also happy. Zhong Peifu said very respectfully. This Xiao wants to continue studying the refining techniques. If fellow Zhong has the time, you can ask your family head what materials are needed to repair the Zhong family's artifacts. If this Xiao has it here, I'll give it to you. If it's incomplete, your Zhong family will have to go out and find it. Okay. Zhong Peifu had actually already received Zhong Tianyao's instructions. Not only did he have to accompany Xue Xue here, but he also had to wait for Xiao Hua to speak. At this moment, he was naturally happy and turned around to leave. Wife, you should also cultivate. Xiao Hua looked around and smiled. This place is very quiet. It's really a good place to cultivate. Are you all right? Hehe, of course I'm all right. What could be wrong? Xiao Hua smiled and said, only good things await your husband. -8. Chapter 21-29. All right. Xue Xue saw Xiao Hua's cocky face and felt helpless. She slowly walked out of the palace, found a place, sat down cross-legged, and continued to cultivate. All right, let this young master take a look. What's the content of this Dawn Rain Continent's primordial secret artifact refining technique, refining the world? The corners of Xiao Hua's mouth held a smile. I wonder what's the difference between it and this young master's refining the world. In the following 10 days, Xiao Hua looked through the entire refining the world and carefully memorized them. After that, he carefully pondered over them, and when he combined the contents of this refining the world with the refining the world in his own memories, he realized that the two refining the world did not have any direct connection, They were simply two different things. However, although the two didn't have any direct connection, they supplemented each other. The artifact refining the world in Xiao Hua's memories recorded the refining methods of all kinds of artifacts. The artifact refining the world on the stone wall recorded the general principles and methods of refining artifacts. This method was called the 5 elements refining technique. It was the general principles of the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. This general principles of refining tools was definitely 100 times stronger than the one Xiao Hua just remembered together with the refining the world. It was like the difference between clouds and mud. Great! Xiao Hua was so happy that he scratched his ears and cheeks. He almost jumped up. He also looked at a lot of refining techniques and had some gains in his heart. He even wanted to refine tools himself and repair the suppressing cloud seal. However, he didn't go through any systematic learning, so it was hard to avoid some mistakes. Now, this 5 elements refining technique covered all refining techniques. In other words, the vast majority of the refining techniques of Dawn Rain Continent could be incorporated into this 5 elements refining technique. No wonder Zhong Tianyao wanted to establish a sect. Xiaohua suddenly understood. With this 5 elements refining technique, the Zhong family would be able to quickly rise up and transform from a cultivation family to a cultivation sect. Of course, this was on the premise that it wasn't coveted by other cultivation families and wasn't detected by other cultivation sects. In the Zhong family's favor can be considered big. It can be compared to this Zhao's favor of saving old ghost Zhong. Xiaohua secretly pondered while memorizing the 5 elements refining technique. At the end of the stone walls, refining the world listed 5 typical examples of using the 5 elements refining arts to refine magic tools. One of them was a magic tool for teleportation magic tablets. Xiaohua could not help but smile when he finished looking at this example. Isn't this the Grand Universe teleportation token? In his space, there was a damaged Grand Universe shifting token waiting to be repaired. He had never imagined that he would actually obtain a complete forging technique. Then wouldn't repairing the Grand Universe teleportation token be a piece of cake? Thinking of this, Xiaohua thought of that old case from many years ago. Just what is the background of Changbai sect's Fantong? There were so many good things in his storage pouch. Furthermore, there were actually 2 layers of space. The Grand Universe shifting token was hidden in the inner layer. After the Feather Immortal gathering, there was a cultivator with a higher cultivation than Martial Uncle Jin Qing who chased after me. Now, it has been dozens of years and there has been no movement. I'm afraid that those people have forgotten about the Grand Universe teleportation token. It's a pity that there are only 5 elements refining arts. There are no 5 elements refining arts that do not belong to the 5 elements refining arts. There is also no 5 elements refining arts that do not belong to the 5 elements refining arts. Xiaohua sighed with regret. Then, he smiled and said, if 5 elements refining arts are so common, then how can it be considered a rare art? If the 5 elements refining arts is so simple, then it can't be a famous magic tool from ancient times. In the following time, Xiaohua comprehended the new refining the world and quietly waited for Zhong Peifu's reply. On this day, Xiaohua waved 2 balls of fire in his hands and was trying out the fire refining arts. Then, he saw Shui walking over. Wife, is there something wrong? Xiaohua smiled and said, is there a problem with the technique? Shui smiled faintly. I have already asked what I should ask. Now, it's a matter of the Zhong family. Yes, I know. Xiaohua stretched out his hand and said, did the Zhong family bring the list of materials? You already know, yet you're still here talking nonsense with me. Shui smiled and handed the jade slip in her hand to Xiaohua. Senior Zhong brought this morning and asked me to give it to you. Tisk tisk, Xiaohua smiled and said, didn't I miss you? I wanted to talk to you more. Then, he looked at the jade slip in his hand and shook his head again. I'm afraid that the materials used to repair magic tools are too rare. Old Ghost Zhong did not dare to come directly, so he asked you to give it to me. Of course. Shui smiled and turned to leave. Who told you to boast that day? Now you're feeling the pain? Don't blame me. Looking at Shui's back as she ran away, he said in a very low voice, if the Zhong family's magic tools did not involve the awakening of the bloodline, If you did not dare to build your foundation, how could I refine magic tools for them for free? Xiao Hua's voice was naturally very low, so it was impossible for Xue Xue to hear it. Xiao Hua released his divine sense and looked at the jade slip. His face showed a trace of strangeness. This was because there were many materials in the jade slip, and the 6 most precious materials were at the very top. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua had collected these 6 materials to repair the cloud-suppressing seal, such as bloodstone, cloud gold liquid, and fragmented goldstone. The Zhong clan did not use many of these materials, so Xiao Hua should be able to take them out. Damn it! If I did not know what was in this space, none of you could see it. I would really think that you were spying on me. Xiao Hua muttered. Then, he looked at the materials in the back and curled his lips. I will not take out the materials in the back no matter what. Let the Zhong family's disciples find them. Then, Xiao Hua walked out from the depths of the palace. Zhong Peifu did not leave at all and was waiting in front of the palace. Seeing Xiao Hua walk out with a smile, Zhong Peifu's face became embarrassed. He cupped his hands and said, "How is Senior's understanding of the refining method?" Well said. Xiao Hua returned the greeting and said, "This ancient refining method complements what this Xiao learned before. Although I still need to apply what I learned, this Xiao is confident that I have already comprehended it." A trace of surprise appeared in Zhong Peifu's eyes. He was no longer shocked as he said, "So, Senior can help my Zhong family repair magic artifacts?" And Xiao Hua didn't like the fact that Zhong Peifu's words seemed to have a hidden meaning. He took out the jade slip and said, "Of the items listed in this jade slip, I only have the first 6 items that are the rarest. The rest are too common, so I didn't bring them with me." Ecstasy. Zhong Peifu's face could only show this kind of expression. He hurriedly shouted, "Recently, there is an auction in my Ming country's Sea City. This Zhong's 3rd brother has already set off. The auction in Sea City has always been attended by the cultivator families and sects in the south of my Ming country. Moreover, people from the islands overseas will also come. Not to mention other materials, there should be a lot of ordinary refining materials. As long as Senior can gather all 7 of the most precious ones, the rest shouldn't be a problem." -8. Chapter 21:30. Oh, Sea City's auction? Xiao Hua's eyes turn and says, "I originally wanted to use these materials to repair my magic treasures. Those ordinary materials also need. Rest assured, Senior Xiao." Zhong Peifu smiles apologetically. This time 3rd brother brought a lot of spirit stones and originally intended to buy 2 sets. One of them is my Zhong family's gift to Senior Xiao. Very good. Xiao Hua is happy in his heart and asks again, "Is Sea City at the seaside? Why do the islands from overseas come to Sea City to bid? How far is QC from here? What is the situation of QC?" Senior Xiao, Sea City is 300 li away from QC. It is the closest city to QC in Ming country and is the foundation of Su family. Zhong Peifu says, Su family's ancestor originally occupied an island overseas. After that island sank, he brought his family's descendants ashore and settled down in Sea City. Thus, he has some connections with the islands overseas. Su family saw that the things on Ming country's mainland are different from the islands overseas. Furthermore, there is no place to trust in the islands overseas. Thus, they used Sea City as the location for the auction and let the various cultivation sects trade with the islands overseas in Sea City. They also benefit from it. As for my Zhongling mountain village, it is not too far from QC. It is about 7,000 to 8,000 li away. My brother has already gone there a few days ago. I am afraid that he has already reached Sea City. Sea City's auction will only last for 3 days. He should be back in a few days. Xiao Hua nods. I might go to QC. How is the situation overseas? This is somewhat troublesome. Zhong Peifu shakes his head slightly and says, the islands overseas are rather mysterious. They do not have much contact with our Ming country cultivators. Usually, they would only come to the mainland during the auction. The rest of the time, they are at sea. I just want to ask about the situation of QC. Xiao Hua explains, I do not intend to visit any island. Junior understands. However, Junior has only been to the shore of QC and did not go deep. Zhong Peifu came to a sudden understanding and replied, but I've heard the disciples of the Ocean City's Sioux clan mention that the winds and waves within the 2,500 kilometers area of the QC can be considered to be calm. Even if there are large winds and waves, it's nothing to cultivators like us, but it might be fatal to some fishermen. However, after 50,000 miles, the wind and waves suddenly become fierce, and the weather is also complicated. The strangest thing is that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth is also relatively thin. To cultivators like me, it is absolutely dangerous. Therefore, the vast majority of the islands are distributed within 10,000 miles. There are very few islands beyond 10,000 miles. It was said that this sea was boundless. The further one went, the thinner the spiritual energy of heaven and earth became. A spirit-severing stage cultivator once tried to fly to the depths of the sea. However, after flying for more than 2 months, he still couldn't see the end. Other than seawater, there was seawater. Even aquatic beasts were becoming increasingly rare. In fact, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was almost gone. That senior didn't dare to move forward and hurriedly rushed back. However, on the way back, he was exhausted and his Zhen Yuan was greatly consumed. He actually encountered a spirit beast in the water. If it wasn't for that senior having some great divine ability and barely escaping from the spirit beast, he would have lost his life in the Kwai He Sea. Ever since then, no cultivator has attempted to search for the edge of that place. So it's that dangerous? Xiao Hua was somewhat stunned and asked again, a 10th grade spiritual beast seems to be only at the late stage of nascent soul, right? That's a spirit-severing stage cultivator, Even if his dermic power was exhausted, it shouldn't be to this extent, right? Hehe, Senior Xiao is a cultivator from the country of Shi. You haven't been to the QC, so you might not know. Zhong Peifu smiled apologetically. The QC is so vast and boundless. There are many sea beasts in it. Oh, Senior can think about it. The QC is an ocean and it's extremely deep. There are different sea beasts in every layer of the water. The deeper you go, the more powerful the sea beasts are. With so many sea beasts fighting each other, those who can survive are mostly powerful characters. 10th grade spiritual beasts are rarely seen on land, but there might be some in the sea. And the strength of a 10th grade spiritual beast, I'm afraid it's even more powerful than the 10th grade spiritual beasts on land. Besides, it's impossible for cultivators like us to enter the depths of the QC. Who knows if there's a sea beast more powerful than a 10th grade spiritual beast? Since even a spirit-severing stage cultivator can't resist it, a transcendent grade spiritual beast, it's not impossible, right? Oh my! Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. He smiled and said, if that's the case, this Xiao is also ignorant and inexperienced. This Xiao knows about the 3 countries of cultivators, sword cultivators, and millions of Ming mountains, but I never thought that in the south of Xiaoyu continent, in this QC, there's actually such a powerful thing. Senior Xiao isn't in Ming country, so naturally you don't know. Zhong Peifu smiled apologetically. We cultivators can still be called kings on land, but in the sea, the cultivators from the various islands can't be the masters of the sea. Furthermore, it is precisely because of this that the cultivators of the outer sea islands are generally more powerful than us cultivators of the continent at the same cultivation level. It's just that their living environment is more dangerous and their reproduction is also less. That's why they can't pose a threat to us Ming cultivators. Zhong Peifu continued, in addition, because there are many spiritual beasts in the sea, a lot of the materials used for refining tools and talismans are mostly sent to the land from the various islands. As for us Ming cultivators, because of an unwritten rule, very few people can go out to the sea to hunt spiritual beasts and obtain these materials. What unwritten rule? Xiao Hua asked curiously. The QC is the QC of the various islands. Ming cultivators, and even the cultivators from the 3 countries of cultivators, can travel to the QC, but they can't make a living by hunting spiritual beasts in the sea. Zhong Peifu explained, even the Su family of Sea City can no longer hunt spiritual beasts in the QC after they fell to Sea City. They can only make a living by bidding. Humph, Xiaohua sneered. What's the point of this rule? Who would be so bored as to go to the dangerous sea to pass their days? Senior Xiao is wrong. According to Junior's knowledge, there are some cultivators, especially the loose cultivators of Ming, who often go to the QC to hunt spiritual beasts in the name of traveling. Loose cultivators? Xiaohua was slightly startled and immediately smiled. Loose cultivators have low cultivation and no foundation. What kind of spiritual beasts can they hunt? It's fine as long as they don't get eaten by spiritual beasts. Could it be that the various islands also don't allow it? Exactly. Zhong Peifu nodded and said, if Senior Xiao goes to the QC, you will know when you get there. The QC is not like the land. There are many fishes and beasts in the sea, almost uncountable. In this kind of situation, just like the cultivators on the land, there are all kinds of spiritual beasts. Even if you are a loose cultivator, you can still find suitable spiritual beasts to hunt. Oh, this Xiao understands. Xiaohua nodded and said, that's right. The Dawn Rain continent is only a flat surface. Actually, there are countless mortals and many cultivators. Moreover, the Guihe Sea is divided into who knows how many layers and is so big. There are definitely many kinds of spirit beasts inside. Actually, the spiritual beasts that loose cultivators can hunt are not considered much. The various islands might not even put them in their eyes. Zhong Peifu said again, it's just that we can't let loose cultivators break these rules. Otherwise, everyone will go to the sea to hunt. How can the various islands survive? SK. The various islands are too stingy. Xiaohua said disdainfully, the QC is so big. How many people do they have? Even if all the cultivators of my Dawn Rain continent went a hunt, how many can they hunt? Zhong Peifu scratched his head and said, Junior also had the same idea. However, Junior did not go deep into the QC and did not know the situation inside. However, if it is as Senior said, the various islands don't need to emphasize this rule, right? Perhaps it is because the spiritual energy in the depths of the sea is thin? Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Xiaohua knew that Zhong Peifu also knew very little. The more he asked, the more vague the answer would be. He might as well go and talk about it. Moreover, he and Xue were just going to take a look at the QC. It's not like they went deep, so why should he care so much? In the future, he still had to return to the Imperial Thunder Sect and live his life in the Imperial Thunder Sect's myriad Thunder Valley. Who would have the patience to care about the matters of the QC? Yes, Zhong Peifu nodded. After pondering for a moment, he said, then, Senior Xiao, are you going to continue comprehending the art of refining here? Or are you going to my Zhong family's refining grounds to practice? Xiaohua thought for a moment and said with a smile, this Xiao has already been underground for dozens of days. I'd better go out. I'll have to trouble fellow Zhong to find a quiet room for my wife. This Xiao will go to the refining grounds. Yes, Senior Xiao, please come this way. Zhong Peifu very respectfully invited Xiaohua and Xue, who he called over, to stand at a corner of the palace. He took out his magic tool. Under the urging of his magic power, the three of them arrived at the shabby ancestral hall. Fellow Taoist Xiao, the moment Xiaohua appeared in the ancestral hall, Zhong Tianyao's divine will followed him. A very humble voice sounded from outside the ancestral hall. I wonder if fellow Taoist has any harvest inside? Many thanks, fellow Zhong. Xiaohua walked out of the ancestral hall and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist didn't keep it to himself. Of course, I gained a lot. At this moment, this Xiao is almost eager to give it a try. I want to see how this refining art is like. Ha ha ha, Zhong Tianyao laughed loudly. He pulled Xiaohua's hand and said, since that's the case, fellow Taoist Xiao, please let this old man experience fellow Taoist's divine skill. Xue followed Zhong Peifu to find a quiet room to practice, while Xiaohua followed Zhong Tianyao to the underground refining grounds of the Zhongling Mountain Villa. Xiaohua had been to this place before. He saw that this newly opened place wasn't too big, but it was in accordance with the rules. It was precisely the place that Zhong Tianyao had deliberately planned for a long time. Xiaohua followed Zhong Tianyao to a rather large room. Zhong Tianyao pointed at a bunch of things on the ground and said embarrassedly, these things were all prepared by this old man for refining these past few years. Moreover, This old man also found a hidden earth fire here. It's a pity that the earth fire is sealed with a restrictive spell. This old man can't open it. I can only use these things to refine it. -8. Chapter 21:31. Oh. Hearing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel curious. If fellow Zhong doesn't mind, can you let me take a look? I can be considered to have dabbled a little in the way of formations. Fellow Taoist also understands formations? Zhong Tianyao really didn't know what to say. Any cultivator that could understand a refining technique was already pretty good. Where would they have the time to comprehend formations? Moreover, the essence of formations had long been lost in the Xiaoyu continent. Apart from special cultivation sects, where else could one learn formations? The Imperial Thunder sect wasn't good at formations. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this way please, Zhong Tianyao said and brought Xiaohua to a deeper place. This place was somewhat similar to the previous palace, but it was even more dilapidated. In a place where the spiritual energy fluctuations were very obscure, there was a faint scorching flame emitting from it. This old man first discovered this earth fire, and then there was a strange movement in the ancestral hall. When this old man used the clan's magic tool to enter, only then did I know that there were relics of refining tools here. Zhong Tianyao explained. Then this old man made arrangements for the nearby area according to the design of refining tools, and Xiaohua's divine sense swept over the restriction. He frowned slightly and waved his hand. If fellow Taoist Zhong believes me, then leave this place to me. Really? Seeing Xiaohua so confident, Zhong Tianyao really didn't know how to express his feelings. Really, a series of pleasant surprises and a series of inconceivable feelings. This was all obtained after he added his malicious words and even had the intention to kill Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please go ahead. I'll go out now. If fellow Taoist has any matters, please send a communication talisman. Zhong Tianyao bowed and saluted. He didn't hesitate any longer and hurriedly walked out. Not to mention, Zhong Tianyao thanked the heavens for sending Xiaohua to Zhongling Mountain Villa, but when Xiaohua saw Zhong Tianyao slip out so nimbly, he was stunned in his heart. Damn it, this is Zhongling Mountain Villa. If it's not Myriad Thunder Valley, why do I feel like I'm the master of this place? Immediately, Xiaohua released his divine sense and examined the restriction above the earth fire. Ever since Xiaohua set up many arrays in Tianmen Mountain, his array formation skills had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had also recovered some of his previous memories, especially the progress of the rabbit array formation. It could be said that his array formation skills had reached a new height. The restrictions on the Zhongling Mountain Villa's earth fire couldn't help but be said to be formidable. In any case, in the eyes of everyone else, it would probably take a few more days to comprehend the restrictions on the Zhongling Mountain Villa's earth fire. In the eyes of Xiaohua's divine sense, Buddhist sense, and Dharma eyes, the array that already had a flaw wasn't in Xiaohua's eyes. In merely 10 days' time, Xiaohua had broken through the restriction and placed a new restriction. Furthermore, he had also refined the control card and handed it over to Zhong Tianyao. Seeing Zhong Tianyao holding the magic tablet with deep gratitude, Xiaohua laughed inwardly. He himself understood that with the 5 elements artifact refining arts, artifact refinement didn't necessarily need to be restricted to earthly fire. All 5 elements could be used. In fact, it was not necessary to use earth fire in the fire refining technique. Zhong Tianyao definitely had yet to comprehend the entire artifact refinement method, which was why he viewed this earth fire with such importance. Using earth fire to refine artifacts was already inferior. How could it be used to refine high-grade artifacts? Although Zhong Peiyuan had already returned and had even brought back the materials to repair the Zhong family's ancestral artifact, Xiaohua didn't pay attention to these matters. Instead, he sat in the quiet room and spat out the icicle Zhu flame that he had been nourishing for a long time. The icicle Zhu flame in his hand was neither fast nor slow, as it danced before Xiaohua's eyes like a dancing fairy. Great, Xiaohua sighed in his heart. He had always wanted to repair the cloud-suppressing seal, but only today had all the conditions been gathered. It was now time to give it a try. Xiaohua waved his hand and many materials flew to the ground. The cloud-suppressing seal also rotated out with a rumbling sound and steadily stopped in midair. Xiao Hua waved his hand again and took out several jade slips. He first glanced at them and pondered in his heart. Soon after, he waved his hand confidently and several wisps of icicle jute flame were separated and burned on the cloud-suppressing seal. Immediately after, Xiao Hua methodically threw more than a dozen materials into the icicle jute flame one after another. Seeing the green smoke continuously rising from it, Xiao Hua knew that this was the impurities within the tempering materials. Xiao Hua's artifact refinement took more than 10 days. Zhong Tianyao and the others were rather anxious in their hearts. However, Xiao Hua had already made it clear before the artifact refinement that if he didn't leave the quiet room, no one was to disturb him. Therefore, Zhong Tianyao would come to the artifact refinement area almost every 2 days to check if Xiao Hua had already come out. On this day, Zhong Tianyao saw that Xiao Hua still hadn't made any movements. Just as he was about to turn around, he heard a dragon roar behind him and a swift and fierce aura rushed over. Ouch! Needless to say, Zhong Tianyao already knew that it was Xiao Hua who had completed the refinement. Without waiting for him to turn around, he saw a mass of bronze-colored brilliance flash past the top of his head. The extremely dazzling brilliance was like an unfolding lotus and stopped in front of him. Wu, a dragon head that still looked somewhat mottled above the lotus, suddenly opened its mouth. The abnormally heavy copper seal under the dragon head flashed with veins. Heaven and earth spiritual energy rapidly condensed and small hurricanes were actually born in midair. Hiss! Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal's heavy might, Zhong Tianyao unconsciously sucked in a breath. He always thought that Xiao Hua was repairing some artifact, but he didn't expect that it was actually a magic treasure. A damaged magic treasure. How could ordinary cultivators dare to have ideas about it? Perhaps only middle-stage core formation cultivators or even late-stage core formation cultivators would dare to attempt it. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Xiao. Zhong Tianyao's face was piled with smiles as he turned around and cupped his hands. Ha ha ha! Behind Zhong Tianyao, Xiao Hua's body flew out. His face carried a trace of arrogance. Of course, he was very proud of himself for being able to finish repairing a magic treasure the first time. Return, Xiao Hua beckoned with his hand. The cloud-suppressing seal gradually shrunk and returned to Xiao Hua's hand. However, the majority of the bottom of the cloud-suppressing seal had already been repaired. The dragon head was also repaired a lot, but its appearance was still unclear. Xiao Hua knew that he didn't have the refining method of the cloud-suppressing seal. These repairs were mostly to repair the edges and could increase the cloud-suppressing seal's might. However, if he truly repaired it completely, without the refining method of the cloud-suppressing seal, it was absolutely impossible. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this magic treasure is truly formidable. When it was damaged, it could still resist a core formation cultivator. Now, I'm afraid it can directly smash a core formation cultivator to death. Zhong Tianyao complimented. Xiao Hua repeatedly waved his hand. Not at all, not at all. I'm just practicing with this thing. How could it have the might that fellow Taoist Zhong spoke of? Zhong Tianyao watched Xiao Hua put away the cloud-suppressing seal, and a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. He smiled apologetically. This magic treasure. This old man thinks it's somewhat familiar. I seem to have seen it somewhere before, or perhaps heard of it. -8. Chapter 2132. Hee. Xiao Hua nodded slightly and didn't reply. Zhong Tianyao tactfully extended his hand, opened a storage pouch, and handed it to Xiao Hua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this is what third brother obtained from the auction in Ocean City. There are also the 7 rare materials that fellow Taoist took out last time. Oh, Xiao Hua extended his hand and received it. He scanned it with his divine sense and took out a jade slip. He smiled and said, "What is this?" Hee. It's naturally the refining method of my Zhong family's magic tool. If fellow Taoist wants to help I repair my magic tool, this thing is indispensable. Zhong Tianyao said with a smile. Xiao Hua frowned slightly. He didn't examine it, but probed. Could it be that the Zhong family's magic tool is so heavily damaged? What does fellow Taoist Xiao think? Zhong Tianyao smiled extremely slyly. He clapped his hand again and took out a magic tool that looked like a bamboo cane. There was a pigeon-like immortal bird on top of the bamboo cane. Xiao Hua scanned it with his divine sense and immediately knew that there was an extremely deep crack on the bamboo cane. Moreover, a small half of the immortal bird was also missing. He could see the inside of the immortal bird's body with a glance. Alas, no wonder there are so many rare materials. Xiao Hua sighed. The degree of damage of this magic tool was definitely more serious than he imagined. From the looks of it, the magic tool's array might also need to be repaired. Fellow Taoist Zhong, this Xiao was a bit careless. Xiao Hua said with a smile. If I can't repair it, fellow Taoist Zhong shouldn't blame this Xiao. Of course not. Zhong Tianyao smiled apologetically. Actually, to tell fellow Taoist Xiao the truth, although this old man has already prepared for over 100 years, although the materials have already been gathered, the reason why I didn't dare to make a move is because this magic tool is too heavily damaged. If this old man didn't obtain this refining method, I wouldn't have pondered about this matter. However, since there is such a condition, this Zhong naturally has to make a move. However, fellow Taoist Xiao definitely knows better than this old man that to repair this kind of magic tool, I'm afraid that just refining techniques alone won't be enough. This old man has also seen fellow Taoist Zhao's restriction techniques. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to decline. Even if fellow Taoist Xiao fails in any way, this old man will definitely not say anything. All right, although Xiao Hua's expression was somewhat difficult, he was actually eager to give it a try in his heart. Repairing this kind of magic tool was no different from refining it from scratch. He really wanted to see if he could succeed in refining it. If there are any leftover materials in the storage bag, please accept them, fellow Taoist Xiao. It's more or less a token of my appreciation. Zhong Tianyao smiled again and said, however, because the formation within the Jade Slip involves my Zhong clan, I hope that fellow Taoist Xiao will keep it a secret. Well said. Xiao Hua nodded. I know my limits. Half a year later, in the guest hall of Zhongling Villa, Xiao Hua sat at the head of the table with a smile on his face. Zhong Tianyao's face was even more excited as he sat beside him. He really couldn't restrain the excitement in his heart. It was also just a moment ago that Xiao Hua suddenly came out from the place where he was refining artifacts and gave him a completely repaired artifact. Xiao, fellow Taoist Xiao, Zhong Tianyao said respectfully, this old man really didn't expect that fellow Taoist would be able to repair my Zhong clan's magic tool so quickly. This is truly beyond my expectations. Fellow Taoist Zhong, did you think that this Xiao would break the artifact? Xiao Hua said with a smile. I won't hide it from fellow Taoist Xiao. This old man really did have such concerns that day. Zhong Tianyao nodded and said, however, if fellow Taoist Xiao can't succeed, this old man will definitely not succeed. Therefore, this old man staked everything on this one throw. That artifact, can it be used? Xiao Hua asked. It can definitely be used. Zhong Tianyao nodded. This old man has already used a special method to test it. There's no problem. Haha, that's good. Xiao Hua stretched and said, since that's the case, this Xiao can be considered to have finished dealing with the Zhong clan's matters. This Xiao still has to accompany my wife on her travels. At this moment, in the guest hall, Zhong Peiyuan and Zhong Peifu were respectfully accompanying Xue Xue. Their faces were also filled with excitement. Zhong Yejing shouldn't have come, but at this moment, she was also accompanying Xue Xue. Zhong Tianyao glanced at the smiling Xue Xue and said, accompanied by a beauty, traveling to the ends of the world. This old man also had such a refined interest 100 years ago. Now that I'm old, at this point, Zhong Tianyao's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He had a question in his heart. This Xiao Hua looks so young. He must have taken something to preserve his youth. How old is he now? Based on his cultivation, he shouldn't be much younger than I, right? Haha, fellow Taoist Zhong has the heavy burden of the Zhong clan on your shoulders. Even if you want to leave, you can't, right? Xiao Hua smiled and then said to Zhong Yejing, I wonder how the fine seeds this Xiao entrusted to the Zhong clan are doing now? Zhong Yejing smiled apologetically and said, this junior has already seen it a few times. The Zhong clan's disciples in Yun City all followed Senior Zhao's instructions, and gave these fine seeds to the secular world to sow. There were no mistakes. That's the best. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He reminded again, these fine seeds will probably be commonly used in my Xiaoyu continent in the future. At this time, the old and the new are replaced, and it's the best way to make money. This Xiao will give this to your Zhong clan. If the secular disciples can make some money, this Xiao won't stop them. However, this definitely can't let the poor people not get the fine seeds because of this. When Zhong Yejing heard this, she was slightly stunned. After thinking carefully for a moment, she suddenly understood. She immediately stood up and said, "This junior really doesn't understand this kind of secular matter. Since senior said so, this junior will go and supervise. If this happens, this junior will punish severely." Good. Xiao Hua clapped. This merit will also belong to the Zhong clan. Then, he stood up and looked at Xue Xue. He said, "Wife, our matter here has been settled. This husband will accompany you to QC." Good. Xue Xue naturally became happy. Zhong Tianyao urged Xiao Hua to stay a few more times, but he couldn't. Thus, he called out all the Zhongling Mountain Villa's disciples and respectfully sent Xiao Hua off. Zhong Tianyao very reluctantly watched Xiao Hua and Xue Xue fly hand in hand into the blue sky. Zhong Tianyao immediately ordered Zhong Peifu, Zhong Peiyuan, and the others to start the awakening of the Zhong clan's disciples' bloodline. Different from the pleasant surprise of Zhong Tianyao and the others, in the courtyard where the qi refining disciples were cultivating, Zhong Haoran had a complicated expression on his face as he watched Xiao Hua happily fly away with Xue Xue. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. During this period of time, Xiao Hua didn't come to find Zhong Haoran for some unknown reason. Thus, the good karma between Zhong Haoran and Xiao Hua had long been forgotten by the Zhong clan's disciples. And the things that happened in the past few years really made Zhong Haoran feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. It was only now that he truly understood what Xiao Hua had asked him when he received the heavenly mending pill. At this time, he felt how childish and impulsive he was that day. Because, in just a few years, Zhong Xiuhan no longer put this young man who cared about her, loved her, and regarded her as a treasure in her eyes. At this time, because of the heavenly pill, Zhong Xiuhan's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. She had already shown her talent among the early-stage foundation establishment disciples and was surrounded by many handsome and confident foundation establishment male disciples. Each and every one of them used different methods to please her. How could she think highly of Zhong Haoran, an qi refining disciple who couldn't speak? Therefore, sympathy wasn't love, and gratitude couldn't repay love. Husband, by doing this, aren't you being too cruel to Zhong Haoran? After leaving Zhongling Mountain Villa, Xiao Hua naturally told her about Zhong Haoran's matter. It wasn't that he didn't think about Zhong Haoran. Sometimes, he would also release his Buddhist awareness to check the situation in Zhongling Mountain Villa. How could he not know about the twists and turns between Zhong Xiuhan and Zhong Haoran? If there were feelings, why would they be together day and night? Xiao Hua held Xue Xue's hand and said, "But if there were distractions, it would be unfair to Zhong Haoran and Zhong Xiuhan." Alas, that's right. Xue Xue sighed. With so many temptations, even if Zhong Xiuhan wanted to maintain her original heart, I'm afraid it wouldn't be easy. My wife. Don't speak for Zhong Xiuhan. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Your husband didn't want to deal with Zhong Xiuhan. Everything was Zhong Haoran's choice. Since he has done it, he shouldn't regret it. Moreover, your husband can faintly see my own shadow in him. If he can persevere in his cultivation, your husband's restriction on him will definitely not last for too long. At that time, he will be able to rise from the ashes. With this experience in the mortal world, his state of mind will definitely be perfect, and it will definitely be useful for his future cultivation. My husband now has the demeanor of an almighty. Xue Xue covered her mouth and laughed. I also know that if you have the chance in the future, you will definitely help Zhong Haoran. Your husband indeed has this plan. Xiao Hua said thoughtfully. It's really not easy to find an upright and plain-spoken person with a firm mind. Could it be that my husband has other arrangements for Zhong Haoran? Xue Xue suddenly realized. To tell you the truth, your husband has an idea. Xiao Hua also nodded and concealed it. Shue Shue said with a smile. Then I will wait and see if Zhong Haoran can enter my husband's eyes. Immediately, Shue Shue rolled her eyes and said with a smile, this senior Zhong is also interesting. From what you said, he didn't hold back and handed over the Zhong family to you. When did he become so generous? Che, Xiao Hua curled his lips. The generous one is your husband. Your husband gave him the storage bag of Fei Xiqing from Jiqing's Fei family. If he thanked your husband hysterically, would he still have a conscience? It can't be. My husband actually gave him all the spirit stones and other things? Shue Shue covered her mouth and pretended to be shocked. How is that possible? Xiao Hua waved his hand disdainfully. I didn't give any spirit stones or pills, but I gave all the tokens and jade slips to old Ghost Zhong. If old Ghost Zhong has the heart, he can get more than Qin Kai from Jiqing's Fei family. I don't believe that my husband didn't leave a share for himself. Xiao Hua blinked and said in a low voice, my wife, do you know what it means to take advantage of opportunities? Gidge, Shue Shue laughed like a flower. After that, Xiao Hua took Shue Shue and didn't rush on their journey. They didn't travel in a straight line, but like before, they sent countless good seeds to the poor and destitute commoners along the way. -8. Chapter 21:33. Alas, your husband's strength is still too insignificant. The more Xiao Hua did this kind deed, the more he felt powerless. This Dawn Rain continent was truly too big. Even if Xiao Hua traveled every day, it was impossible for him to spread the seeds throughout the entire Dawn Rain continent. Yes, I've also been considering this recently. Shue Shue's heart ached for Xiao Hua, and she said considerately, husband, you should think of a good idea. Husband alone definitely can't save all the people of Dawn Rain continent. Immortal Alliance? Xiao Hua suddenly realized. However, just as he finished speaking, he mocked himself. Your husband is merely a foundation establishment cultivator. I don't even know where the Immortal Alliance is. What right do I have to find them? It's not just that. Shue Shue shook her head as well. I've occasionally heard Master say that the Immortal Alliance only appears when the Tao sect is in danger of being exterminated. They don't care about the life and death of ordinary sects, let alone the common people. Why don't we find the sect master and ask? Xiao Hua probed again. Shue Shue hesitated and bit her lips. Although she didn't say anything, her expression didn't show that she agreed with Xiao Hua's words. Forget it. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said gloomily, I have a clear conscience, that's it. While speaking, Xiao Hua smelled a salty and moist smell from his mouth and nose. Rather unaccustomed to it, he asked curiously, why is it so smelly? Could it be that some family's salted fish has become smelly? Ha ha ha, Shue Shue also sniffled and said, husband, you've made a fool of yourself. We've already reached the seaside. The sea breeze blew the moist smell over. As she spoke, Shue Shue activated her magic power and flew forward. Her fluttering clothes and fluttering hair were incomparably graceful. Female cultivators are truly unfathomable. It's just a sea? Why are they so excited? Xiao Hua released his Buddhist perception and had already seen the Gue he see 100 miles away. The waves beating against the shore practically sent the sound of the waves over. We're finally here. Xiao Hua sighed inwardly. He let out a long whistle and chased behind Shue Shue. He grabbed Shue Shue's slender waist and rushed towards the place where the waves came from. This is the sea. Even though he'd already noticed it with his divine perception, Xiao Hua couldn't help but sigh when he really saw the magnificent and boundless ocean of darkness with his eyes. The magnificence of the ocean was truly too impactful to the eye. Even if it was nether, flame forest, or inkcloud forest, it would absolutely not be as shocking as this boundless ocean. Not to mention, at this moment, it was a gentle breeze. The fine lines were like fish scales, rippling under the golden sunlight. That glittering golden scenery made the money-grubber Xiao Hua's eyes almost emit golden light. In addition, from time to time, tiny fish would surface from the sea, and the birds that were soaring above the sea would swoop down and devour them in one gulp. On the beach, crabs of all sizes were scurrying around, and fist-sized shells were embedded in the rocks, moving slightly. The combination of movement and stillness was truly a tranquil scene between heaven and earth. Xue Xue landed on a protruding reef and slightly closed her eyes. She didn't have any protective yellow talismans around her body, so she let the sea breeze and the splashes of the waves wet her clothes. At this moment, Xue Xue was wearing a pink dress. Not only did the wind blow her clothes up, wrapping around her curvy figure, even the traces of water that were gradually getting wet also revealed some spring scenery. Xiaohua didn't approach and only watched from afar. He knew that the current Xue Xue was the Xue Xue who had broken away from her shackles, the Xue Xue who dared to love and hate. Even though Xue Xue didn't release her divine perception, Xiaohua felt that Xue Xue wanted to place this entire ocean of darkness into her bosom. I'm afraid that only such a situation can allow her to build her foundation. Xiaohua seemed to suddenly understand the reason why Xue Xue wanted to see the sea. He also seemed to understand why Xue Xue didn't want to build her foundation. Looking at Xue Xue's intoxicated appearance, Xiaohua once again gazed into the distance. The place where the two of them flew over was a bit remote. All around them were steep cliffs. Fishermen rarely came here, and most of them were seabirds spreading their wings. On Xiaohua's left, a few li away, a small fishing village impressively came into view. The first thing that entered Xiaohua's eyes was the fishing net that was spread out on the shore. A wooden frame was set up to spread the fishing net over there. Under the sunlight, it actually had a sparkling luster, looking quite majestic. There was no one around the fishing net, but there were dozens of seabirds gathered in front of the fishing net. Occasionally, they would stick their heads out to peck at something. They should be swallowing the small fish and prawns that escaped from the fishing net. Next to the fishing net, there were several small wooden boats. They weren't big, but they weren't small either. Some were laid flat, some were upside down, and there were even some that were slanted. The boats were covered in moss and were still very shabby. Presumably, they were discarded by the fishermen. It's a bit strange. Xiaohua was puzzled. It's a sunny day now. Why don't I see anyone fishing in the sea? Xiaohua's divine sense swept through the fishing village. In the fishing village, there were many women, children, the elderly, and the weak. Strong men were rare. Many of these women, children, the elderly, and the weak had worried expressions on their faces. Although they stayed in the small huts, from time to time, they would raise their heads and cast their gazes towards the depths of Kueha Sea, as if that was where they were concerned. Oh, could it be that the fishermen have all gone fishing in the sea? Xiaohua thought as he released his divine sense towards the depths of Kueha Sea. Xiaohua's divine sense swept through the fishing village. In the fishing village, there were many women, children, the elderly, and the weak. Strong men were rare. Many of these women, children, the elderly, and the weak had worried expressions on their faces. Although they stayed in the small huts, from time to time, they would raise their heads and cast their gazes towards the depths of Kueha Sea, as if that was where they were concerned. Oh, could it be that the fishermen have all gone fishing in the sea? Xiaohua thought as he released his divine sense towards the depths of Kueha Sea. After waiting for a while, Xiaohua's lips curled into a smile. Dozens of li away, two rather large ships were slowly drifting in this direction. On the ships were dozens of men, all of them bare-chested. The decks were piled full of fish. It should be the men of this fishing village, returning from a rewarding journey. Hee. No wonder they're all looking towards the sea. They probably know that today is the day they're supposed to return. Xiaohua retracted his divine sense. Smelling the salty sea breeze, his heart suddenly felt warm. It seemed that many years ago, he had also had such expectations, and had also been anticipated by others. To be worried by others, and to be worried by others. Although this kind of life is dull, sometimes it's quite interesting. Xiaohua's heart was somewhat gloomy. Although these women and children have worried expressions on their faces, in their hearts, they have faith that their husbands will return today. But what about me? Even now, I still don't know where I was born, where my parents, where my brothers and sisters are. -8. Chapter 21:34. However, with Fairy Hong Xia and Xue Xue, Xiaohua's gaze was filled with tenderness as he looked at Xue Xue, who was like a naughty child. I can be considered to have a place to settle down in this dawn-rain continent. Just like this, Xiaohua casually sat on the fine sand with one leg bent, one elbow on his knee, one hand holding his chin, and the other hand grabbing a handful of fine sand from the ground. With a slight tilt, the fine sand slowly slid down from Xiaohua's hand. Over and over again. Xiaohua did it unintentionally, but after looking at it for a long time, Xiaohua suddenly became pensive. This sand is buried on this beach, and no one knows about it. Perhaps it has been here since ancient times, or perhaps it was washed from the bottom of the sea. If I didn't come here, this sand would be silent forever. However, I came. I thought it was because of Shue that I came. I grabbed this sand up high, and it slid down again and slid down again. Xiaohua's thoughts slowly drifted away. He seemed to be thinking a lot, but also seemed to be thinking very little. His comprehension seemed to be very deep, but also seemed to be very little. Shue had long seen Xiaohua sitting there. She liked this kind of free aura, liked this kind of fierce sea breeze. Her temperament had always been that kind of intense love and hate. However, ever since she entered the Imperial Thunder sect, for the sake of cultivation, she cut her feet to fit her shoes. Later on, for Xiaohua, she tried her best to. And she had always been doing it. She wanted to change her personality, to become a gentle and virtuous little boy. She had changed a lot now, but her heart still had some shackles. Now, her heart had merged with the sea breeze. Her heart had merged with the boundless sea. She really wanted this leisure, this indulgence, this freedom to come a little more. Hua, a faintly discernible noise came over, slightly disturbing Shue's thoughts. Shue raised her head and saw that in a small fishing village far away, a large group of women, children, the elderly, and the weak were supporting each other as they came out of their small houses. In front of them were dozens of drooping naked little boys, stumbling as they ran. Many of them directly fell on the fine sand. However, these people's faces were filled with joy. Above the boundless sea, two indistinct masts could be seen, like two small sticks that a child was playing with. This mast was no longer a mast, but the hope and joy of all the fishermen in the fishing village. What they welcomed was the man who worked hard for their lives under the mast. Haha, Shue felt a sweetness in her heart. She also looked at Xiaohua, watching as he gradually transformed from a powerless loose cultivator into a cultivator with outstanding strength who cared for the common people. Wasn't he the mast in his heart? The tranquility of the Kueha Sea was exactly like this. Everything was under the sunlight. Amidst the sound of the waves, time gradually faded away. The two masts gradually became clear, revealing two dilapidated ships. Shue jumped down from the reef. She didn't urge her magic power. Instead, she walked slowly, step by step, across the beach. Her slender footprints were left on the beach, winding and firm. Shue walked to about 10 zhang away from Xiaohua. She sensed Xiaohua's abnormality again. The sea breeze blew past his body as if it didn't exist. Xiaohua's hand was still constantly grabbing the fine sand, tilting the fine sand. However, the fine sand was lifted up by the sea breeze and passed through Xiaohua's body. At this time, Shue was already accustomed to the strange sight. She knew Xiaohua was comprehending a cultivation method, so she sat on the ground with a smile hanging on the corner of her mouth. However, there was some love in her eyes, some reluctance, and even some pain. She knew that now that her feelings had been released, she was afraid she would soon be able to build her foundation. As for building her foundation, Shue had an indescribable feeling. On the surface of the sea, regardless of the distance, it was like looking at a mountain and running a horse to death. Although the masts were already in sight, by the time the entire ship could be clearly seen, it was already sunset. At this time, the sea scenery was different. The orange sunlight dyed the sky to the west. Countless clouds formed various shapes, decorating the sky. The waves were a bit big. Fragments of red were accompanied by more and more darkness. Sprinkling on the surface of the sea, many seabirds gradually returned to the tide, carrying the day's fatigue. The slowly moving ship dragged the shadow on the side, also carrying the hard work of the fishing village's men. However, even if dusk came, even if the wind and waves were big, even if it was getting colder, the fishing village's women still held their children's hands in their hands. They allowed the shadow to grow longer and longer, but they still waited on the shore. It seemed that if this was not the case, their worries would not be eased. But at this time, a few miles ahead of the two ships, a fierce rumbling sound suddenly rang out, and a large wave of water soared into the sky along with the sound. Without waiting for the wave to fall, dozens, or even hundreds of figures flew out from the sea. They were actually divided into two groups of cultivators fighting. The dozens of cultivators in front rushed out of the Kueha Sea. The water-blue brilliance around them swayed slightly, sending out strange ripples under the setting sun. The cultivators chasing behind them were dressed in all kinds of different colors, and the magic tools in their hands were also strange. In particular, the cultivators chasing after them were all valiant, far from the cultivators in front of them. A loud voice rang out, "Fellow Taoists, why are you forcing us so hard? We are all itinerant cultivators, and we are just traveling near the Kueha Sea. The sea beasts we killed before were all obtained casually. Fellow Taoist, please understand." Ha ha ha, a forthright female cultivator's voice rang out. A middle-stage Foundation establishment female cultivator with thick limbs and rough skin raised her voice. "Boy, why are you acting like a bunch of brats in front of me? I have been watching you for half a year. You said that you were training, but you just wandered around the Kueha Sea every day. I don't see you cultivating, but you caught a lot of sea beasts. You have a good harvest these days, right?" TSK, fellow Taoist Co. A man with bronze-colored skin who was also in the middle stage of Foundation establishment sneered and said, "What's the point of talking to these cultivators with evil intentions? They dare to use the name of itinerant cultivators to hunt sea beasts, so they must be disciples of some aristocratic family or sect. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell with one look. How can itinerant cultivators reach Foundation establishment so easily? Moreover, they are still wandering around the Kueha Sea. Why aren't they cultivating?" Fellow Taoist Yang is right. Another thick man with a big axe in his hand shouted with a big black face full of whiskers, "The women of Xingming Island are too weak. In my opinion, they should have been killed long ago. Why the hell should I care about them? Awakening Island only knows how to kill, kill, kill. Can't you be a little more refined? The reputation of our overseas islands has been ruined by you." A male cultivator wearing a sparse Confucian robe said in a refined manner. "Bah," the thick man spat. "You sure are refined. Do you think the number of sea beasts killed by your Tiger Spine Island is small? I heard that Tiger Spine Island's blood tiger mental cultivation technique requires the blood of sea beasts to reach large success. Who knows how many sea beasts' blood you need to reach Foundation establishment? Damn it, you actually dare to be refined in front of me." The four cultivators from the overseas islands were talking with fervor and assurance. They were Xingming Island's Ko Qinglian, Awakening Island's Xiang Wenqing, Awakening Islands by Min, and Tiger Spine Island's Ding Xuan. They were the leaders of the disciples sent by the four surrounding sects. Looking at their appearance, they seemed to have a card up their sleeves and were not worried at all that the so-called itinerant cultivators would run away. Looking at the itinerant cultivator who was talking with them just now, he actually had a normal expression and did not seem worried at all. Although there were only a few early-stage Foundation establishment disciples among the dozens of cultivators following behind him, they were the same as the itinerant cultivator and even had a sneer on their face. Don't talk nonsense. Ko Qinglian was a female cultivator after all. She was the first to notice that something was wrong and transmitted her voice. These dozens of cultivators look unfamiliar. They don't seem to be Ming country's disciples. Moreover, they are too calm. There are only 5 early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators. They are not a match for us at all. But just now, they clearly had the strength to run away. Why did they stop here? Why didn't they go ashore? Ha ha, Madame Ko is too cautious. The refined Ding Xuan was no longer refined at this time. He licked his lips and laughed. In the eyes of mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators like us, these are just children. What tricks can they play? Ming country's cultivator families and sects all know the rules of our Go He Hai. Which one of them did not follow the rules? Even if they are disciples of some family, if they are killed by us, then so be it. What tricks can they play? Good. Since that is the case, let's kill all these cultivators. Hearing this, Bai Min could no longer hold back. He waved his thick arms, and the big axe actually summoned a shadow. It flashed with a trace of sharp light and chopped towards an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator dozens of feet away. Attack. Seeing Bai Min attack, everyone was stunned. According to their original plan, they still wanted to find out the details of these cultivators and see what they were planning to do. But since Bai Min attacked, they had no choice but to attack as well. They could only wave their hands and order their disciples. Yes, the disciples received the order. Regardless of whether they were Qi refinement or foundation establishment cultivators, all of them activated their yellow talismans and magic tools. Rays of blue light flashed around everyone. Most of the disciples of the overseas islands had a water attribute physique. Their magic tools and yellow talismans were also of the water attribute. The water attribute spiritual Qi of heaven and earth around Go He Hai flocked together with the magic seals. It was not a big deal for one cultivator to cast a magic seal. It was also not a big deal for 10 cultivators to cast a magic seal. However, with dozens of cultivators, and even a few mid-stage and early-stage foundation establishment cultivators' magic seals, the amount of spiritual Qi of heaven and earth absorbed was much more. Following the flow of spiritual Qi of heaven and earth, fine winds were produced. And these fine winds were gradually strengthened during the rising tide of the evening. Borrowing the strength of the wind, the rising tides and waves were also larger. Let's go. When the rogue cultivator saw this, a trace of nervousness appeared on his face. His eyes looked around as if he was looking for something. Then, his eyes lit up. With a wave of his hand, he flew towards the 2 ships drifting in the wind and waves. To be continued. -8. Chapter 21:35. Where do you think you're going? Bai Min and the rest sneered. The Dharma artifacts in their hands had already flown out. Not only did the Dharma artifacts spill out blue light, even the seawater above the Kuai-He Sea was drawn into the air by their Dharma artifacts, condensing into water pillars and smashing towards the disciples who were flying. Rise, the several foundation establishment cultivators who were guarding behind the itinerant cultivators saw how powerful the attacks were and hurriedly stopped. They looked at each other and secretly nodded. Then, they waved their hands at the same time and a ladle-like Dharma artifact appeared in each of their hands. The few of them activated the Dharma artifacts in unison. But when the Dharma power reached out, the ladles suddenly disappeared and turned into several black holes. A huge suction force was born from the black holes. Not only did the light of Bai Min and the rest disappear into the black holes, even the water pillars that were drawn by the others also fell into them. Even huge waves were raised on the Kuai-He Sea, and these huge waves were sucked in by the black holes. What Dharma artifact is this? Ko Qinglian was slightly shocked and quickly scanned with her divine perception. What kind of itinerant cultivators can this be? Bai Min snorted and clenched his fist. He activated his Dharma power and said angrily, "Which sect wants to go against the overseas islands? I want to see how powerful your Dharma artifacts are." As Bai Min activated his Dharma power, waves of monstrous waves flew up from the sea that was no longer calm and smashed towards the itinerant cultivators. That's right. I also want to see how powerful this Dharma artifact is in the hands of a few foundation establishment initial stage brats. Ding Xuan also cursed, and actually gave up on the Dharma incantation that he was good at. Like Bai Min, he activated the waves and poured them towards the few black holes. Alright, I also want to see. Ko Qinglian also laughed. They were all overseas cultivators. It was normal that they didn't know other Dharma spells, but who didn't know the art of controlling water? Who would be worse than who? Instantly, more than 10 water dragons were born on the surface of the water and entered the black holes. It had to be said that the strategy of the cultivators from the outer sea islands was truly impressive. In the blink of an eye, just as the other cultivators shot out a wave of yellow talismans, there was a loud rumble. The top of the head of a foundation establishment cultivator on the left trembled. The cultivator's face turned red and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was dispirited as he fell into the sea like a leaf and was instantly submerged by the turbulent waves. Above the foundation establishment cultivator, a black and white light flashed and ripples formed in the air. A stream of water gushed out like a waterfall. At the same time, the faces of the other foundation establishment cultivators changed slightly. Useless thing. A light reprimand sounded. In the space about 10 feet away from the crowd, a burst of light flashed and the figure of a middle foundation establishment cultivator gradually appeared. This cultivator had already appeared and immediately formed a strange Dharma seal with his hands. A hazy light flashed and pounced on the water. With a crunching sound, the falling water actually froze. Following the surge of black and white light, the ice was once again submerged into the black holes. Who was fellow Taoist? Seeing this, Ding Xuan's face was slightly startled. He cupped his hands and asked, "Could it be that you're with these rogue cultivators?" Ding Xuan emphasized the word rogue cultivator. Unfortunately, the cultivator didn't pay attention to him and only urged his Dharma chi to maintain the black holes. At this time, how could Ding Xuan and the others not know that there was a powerful cultivator among them? There was no need for others to say anything. Bai Min waved his hand and the big axe swung out again. This time, there was no afterimage. The huge axe split the water and directly attacked the waist of the cultivator. With such a fierce momentum, no one doubted that as long as the axe struck, not to mention the light protecting the body, even if there was some kind of spiritual armor protecting the body, this cultivator would be seriously injured. The eyes of the cultivators from the various islands were all fixed on the axe, trying to see if the cultivator was going to dodge or maintain his transcendent treasure. Suddenly, from the side, a thin flying sword, like a nimble flying snake, silently pierced towards Bai Min in the midst of the already tumbling waves. Damn it! Where did this shameless person come from? That flying sword was very vicious. Bai Min didn't dare to put his life in the hands of Ding Xuan and the others. He had no choice but to turn the axe around and forcefully chop down. That flying sword wasn't afraid of Bai Min's great strength. It raised its head and was about to stab Bai Min's wrist. Dang! Bai Min's shadow slightly slanted and struck the flying sword. The flying sword was slightly knocked away, but Bai Min's axe had already turned around. As Bai Min's eyes stared at a place in the space in front of him, he activated his magic power and the axe brought up a wave that soared into the sky. Each drop of water contained a very strong force and struck towards that place in the void. Hee, with a light laugh, the invisibility talismans of the mid-foundation establishment cultivators who weren't tall were also destroyed by Bai Min's attack. As the cultivators made hand seals, their flying swords flew back to save themselves and turned into rainbows to chop at the big axe. There's something wrong. At this time, a second mid-foundation establishment cultivator appeared. Ko Qinglian and the others felt different from before and increasingly felt that things were not good. At this time, other than the foundation establishment cultivators fighting each other, the aura refinement disciples were trading yellow talismans back and forth. Many disciples had already died. On the surface of the sea, dark clouds suddenly rose. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was disturbed and chaotic, and the waves surged. The cultivators naturally didn't care. They were all flying in the air. The two ships had long stopped and even dropped their anchors. Everyone's faces were pale and they were trembling. They looked up at the people fighting not far away. The entire ship was rocking in the waves. The ship, which originally looked quite big, was now almost like a toy. Looking at the women and children on the beach, everyone had a miserable expression on their faces. Many people were paralyzed on the ground and sobbing silently. The fishermen were admittedly innocent, but when the city gate caught fire, the fish in the moat would also suffer. They just happened to be passing by this place, so how could they escape? Shui had seen it long ago, but she was an aura refinement cultivator and simply couldn't intervene. As for Xiaohua, he was currently comprehending karma. His hand was constantly grabbing sand and then pouring it down in torrents, over and over again, repeating over and over again. Shui's face gradually became anxious, because at this time, 5 mid-foundation establishment cultivators had already appeared one after another. They held the 5 black hole-like magic tools in their hands and blocked in front of Xiang Wenqing and the others. Fellow Taoists, why is this? Xiang Wenqing's eyes turned rapidly. He cupped his hands and said, could it be that there's a misunderstanding? Ha ha ha. We Xianlu sect disciples only came to this coastal area to travel, but you're chasing us so relentlessly. Didn't you always want to know why we came? I'll tell you right now. The cultivator in front raised his head and laughed loudly. Xianlu sect disciples? Xiang Wenqing frowned and immediately exchanged glances with Ko Qinglian and the others. Everyone was puzzled. How could Xianlu sect disciples see these small fish and shrimps? -8. Chapter 21:36. However, I and the others originally didn't want to reveal our faces. But you all just had to force us like this. That cultivator sneered again. Since that's the case, I and the others have come. I'll let you all see I's true face. Oh, so it's like this. Ko Qinglian smiled and bowed. Since you're fellow Taoists from Immortal Music Sect, then we naturally won't pursue this matter. We'll have to trouble you. That's right, Immortal Music Sect has a very good relationship with my overseas islands. Fellow Taoists, you're only here to travel. We've misunderstood you. This doesn't count as anything. We'll leave now. Fellow Taoists, please do as you please. Xiang Wenqing also smiled. Ha, fellow Taoists, isn't it too late to leave now? That cultivator laughed loudly. My Immortal Music Sect actually values you little sea beasts from Guihe Sea. My Immortal Music Sect discovered. But before this cultivator finished speaking, a cultivator beside him frowned and said, Third junior brother, aren't you talking too much? Yes, little brother understands. That cultivator immediately shut his mouth and waved his hand. Fellow senior brothers, since these cultivators have seen our whereabouts, then we'll do as the seniors said. Leave no one alive. Hearing this cultivator's command, the 5 foundation establishment middle stage cultivators' bodies flashed with a blue brilliance. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth were all absorbed into their bodies. Go. Ko Qinglian and the others didn't dare to say anything more. They knew that they'd already fallen into the others' trap. Hearing everyone's loud shout, they urged their magic power and their bodies overflowed with brilliance. They were about to escape into the water. Rise, hearing that foundation establishment middle stage cultivators' low rebuke, the 5 cultivators simultaneously sat cross-legged in midair. Their hands formed extremely strange seals. Rays of blue light surged and rushed into the seals. Following that, rays of blue flowers flew out from the seals and rushed into the black hole from before. Moo, 5 consecutive sounds like a bull tearing at something rang out. That black hole suddenly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it grew from a small to a few feet in size. At this moment, what flew out from that black hole were palm-sized snowflakes. These snowflakes were different from the snowflakes falling from the sky. They were like a torrential downpour, spinning and covering the sky as they fell towards the surrounding space of several thousand feet. In an instant, the temperature within the area of several hundred feet where the cultivators were fighting dropped rapidly. Ice shards condensed in the air and fell into the sea. The surging waves were still moving at first, but in just a few seconds, they froze. Kacha-kacha, sounds that sounded like ice being frozen, gradually spread from the surface of the sea to the bottom of the sea. Ding Xuan and the others had just fallen into the water and were about to escape when the power of the ice was transmitted, freezing the seawater within 1,000 feet. They couldn't help but be shocked. What kind of calculation was this? What kind of great effort was this? However, they weren't in a hurry to think too much about it. They hurriedly turned around and flew out of the frozen sea. One by one, their eyes turned red. They activated their magic tools and fiercely attacked the 5 cultivators who still had their eyes closed and were circulating their magic power. Humph! The tall and skinny cultivator who spoke first widened his eyes slightly and waved his hand. For rays of light flashed past and pierced towards Ding Xuan and the others. Wherever the light passed, the ice shards in the air formed along with the light and attacked the 4 of them like 4 slender flying swords. Pong! The ice shards didn't have any resistance against the four people's magic tools and shattered upon contact. However, the shattered ice shards flew in all directions. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth around the magic tools turned into ice shards. In a short period of time, the four people's water-type magic tools began to freeze. This is bad. Bai Min secretly panicked. He already felt that the magic power inside the magic tools had condensed and couldn't be controlled freely. He knew that in a short moment, the magic tools would lose control. What should we do? Bai Min hurriedly spread out his divine sense and looked around. However, at this moment, the dozens of Qi refinement disciples from the four islands who had escaped into the water were unable to fly out of the ice. It was obvious that they were all sealed under the sea. The seawater under their feet had already completely frozen into ice. The dark green ice was as clear as crystal and was extremely beautiful. However, this was far from the end. What was even more frightening was still around them. Within a radius of several hundred meters, strands of blue brilliance flashed, and streaks of white ice formed, gradually condensing in midair. A kind of power that could confine the surroundings was born from the previous 5 black holes. It can't be that everything within a radius of 1,000 feet has been frozen, right? Bai Min came to a realization and still couldn't believe it. Damn it, if we don't leave now, when will we? Bai Min's figure suddenly flew up and flew towards the 2 ships in the distance. At this moment, the 2 ships were still not sealed in the layer of ice. They were only at the edge of the ice seal. Although the 2 ships had already dropped their anchors, how could the waves in the hands of the cultivators be suppressed by the anchors of the mortal ships? One of the ships was already in imminent danger. Now, with the help of the cultivator's divine sense, the frozen layer of ice raised another wave. This wave was even higher and bigger than the previous one. With just a wave, the ship was overturned and collapsed like a small wooden boat. The entire ship immediately fell apart, and the dozens of fishermen on the ship inevitably fell into the water. A series of miserable cries could be heard. If it were any other time, the fishermen wouldn't be too shocked even if they fell into the water. However, at this moment, the seawater was about to freeze. The coldness of the seawater was far beyond their imagination. The moment they fell into the water, their limbs stiffened and they couldn't move. Many of the fishermen began to sink into the water. Of course, although the fishermen on the other ships were so cold that their teeth were chattering, they didn't dare to be negligent. They threw out wooden logs and other objects, trying to save the fishermen who had fallen into the water. Seeing Bai Min escape, the other 3 didn't think too much. They flew in 4 different directions, trying to escape this calamity. Out of the 5 cultivators, 4 of them opened their eyes. With a wave of their sleeves, they each stretched out their index fingers and pointed at the black holes in front of them. With a series of cracking sounds, a layer of pure white ice rapidly formed several feet in front of Bai Min and the other 3, blocking their flight path. Fight! Other than Bai Min, Coaching Lian, and the others all threw out the magic tools in their hands. All the magic power in their bodies surged into the magic tools. They knew that if they didn't do their best now, they wouldn't have another chance in the future. Pong, pong, pong. 3 loud sounds rang out. The magic tools hit the layer of ice and broke it. However, when the 3 figures flew into the layer of ice and were about to escape, the layer of ice condensed again. It was extremely easy to freeze the 3 people and their magic tools in the layer of ice. Looking at Bai Min again, he suddenly put his magic tool into his storage bag. He suddenly slapped his forehead and a yellow flame appeared. From his mouth, he actually spat out a fist-sized fire bead. That fire bead emitted a blazing flame and rushed into the layer of ice. Bai Min's magic power wasn't weaker than the 5 strange cultivators. However, he fell into their trap and his magic tool was restrained. Now that he took out a fire-type magic tool, it naturally broke the layer of ice in an instant. His figure also broke out of the layer of ice. Right now, it wasn't just a layer of ice anymore. It should be an exquisite ice palace. Seeing Bai Min escape, the 5 cultivators weren't surprised at all. There was even a hint of laughter in their eyes. However, one of the cultivators on the left sneered and stood up. He slapped his hand, and a bottle-shaped magic treasure flew out. A misty, watery light came out of the bottle and attacked Bai Min. Bai Min was as anxious as a stray dog. He didn't look back and grabbed with his hand. The fire bead flew out and a raging flame met the attack. With a sizzling sound, the raging flame and the watery light collided. They were both sent flying. That raging flame just happened to hit the last ship. Immediately, a large hole appeared on the ship. Moreover, it began to burn. How could Bai Min and the others care about the life and death of these fishermen? The two of them waved their hands, formed hand seals, and began to fight again. Husband, husband. Xue Xue saw clearly from afar. As early as when the first ship was destroyed, she called out to Xiao Hua in a low voice. She even used her hand to push Xiao Hua. However, Xiao Hua turned a deaf ear to her. Xue Xue even pushed the void, just like before. What should we do? Seeing the second ship being hit again, the women and children on the shore were crying. Even a few elderly women wanted to rush into the sea to save them. Xue Xue was abnormally anxious. When Xue Xue's gaze fell on Xiao Hua's hand, her eyes unconsciously lit up. Xue Xue immediately reached out without hesitation and completely caught the sand that Xiao Hua poured down. And Xue Xue's move was indeed useful. The seemingly motionless Xiao Hua snorted. That sound was like the sound of nature that shook the entire world. Immediately, Xiao Hua opened his eyes and looked at Xue Xue. Ah? Xue Xue naturally also looked at Xiao Hua. However, when she saw Xiao Hua's silver eyes, a faintly discernible hand, and a river that was as bright as the stars in his fingers, she let out a low cry. It was as if her entire gaze and person were sucked into that river. In just an instant, Xiao Hua's eyes rolled, revealing human emotions. His bright black eyes returned to their original state. Xue Xue. Xiao Hua returned to normal. Looking at the deathly pale Xue Xue, he asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Xue Xue was grief-stricken. Her eyes were extremely sad. However, within that sadness, there was also a trace of relief and even a trace of pride. Hearing Xiao Hua's call, she reluctantly squeezed out a smile. Pointing at the sea, she said, "Husband, there are people fighting there. 2 ships belonging to the secular world were destroyed. There are probably dozens of lives at stake. This concubine knows that husband is compassionate and would rather delay his cultivation to save them. So, okay." Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, and he immediately knew what Xue Xue was talking about. He immediately said, "This husband will go there right away." Husband. Xue Xue clenched her teeth and said, "Husband, can you give that pink jade slip to this concubine first? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for it." -8. Chapter 21:37. Good. Xiao Hua didn't have time to think about it. He gave the jade slip to Xue Xue and flew into the air towards the ship. Where did this fellow Taoist come from? Why don't I see immortal music sect disciples here? Xiao Hua's divine sense had already attracted the attention of the 5 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators. When they saw that Xiao Hua had actually flown over and was even flying towards Bai Min, the tall and thin cultivator in the lead stood up and asked coldly. When he asked, the seals in his hands were not completed. In the air, countless ice shards rapidly condensed, blocking Xiao Hua's path. Scram! Xiao Hua had already seen the dozens of fishermen in a critical situation. Seeing this cultivator blocking his path, he was already unable to restrain his anger. With a wave of his hand, a wall of samadhi true fire was born. That seemingly incomparably beautiful ice palace, which seemed unbreakable in the eyes of cultivators, was like snow encountering fire. It was extremely easy to burn a large passage. Moreover, this ice layer was still burning in the samadhi true fire. Samadhi true fire. That cultivator was greatly alarmed and hurriedly waved his hand. The remaining 3 cultivators all stood up solemnly. Each of their hands were about to form seals, preparing to attack Xiao Hua. Wait! A voice that was filled with joy, doubt, and even hatred rang out. Yes, Sect Master. When the 4 people heard, their faces were shocked. Immediately, they all bowed towards the source of the voice. In the air, another person's figure appeared. This person's cultivation was only at foundation establishment, but that incomparably handsome and evil-looking cultivator's eyes didn't seem to be a cultivator of the human world. This person was Zhang Qingxiao. This guy, didn't he die in the Inkcloud Black Forest? How could he come out alive? Zhang Qingxiao looked at Xiaohua with a complicated gaze. The feeling in her heart was really indescribable. His current cultivation seems to be comparable to middle-stage foundation establishment. If he died, of course I know he has nothing to do with Master's death. However, not only did he not die, but his magic power also advanced by leaps and bounds. He's almost only a bit weaker than me. He was previously a loose cultivator. Even if he entered the Imperial Thunder sect, how could he compare to me? In that case, this guy definitely has nothing to do with Master's death. When she heard the news of Xiaohua's death, Zhang Qingxiao was very sad and cried for Xiaohua. However, now that she saw that Xiaohua wasn't dead, and that his strength was even comparable to the middle stage of foundation establishment, Zhang Qingxiao began to suspect Xiaohua instead. Looking at Xiaohua again, he didn't even look at the four cultivators. With a flash of his figure, he had already flown to the sky above the ship. Go! Xiaohua slapped his forehead, and the cloud-suppressing seal flew out with a rumbling sound. A layer of bronze light descended from the sky and completely covered the wreckage of one ship and the other ship. Furthermore, within that ancient bronze brilliance, there were tiny scarlet-green flames faintly flowing. Under the brilliance of the suppressing cloud seal, the flames on the ship were instantly extinguished, and the ice under the ship gradually melted. Even the surging waves quickly calmed down under the brilliance of this brilliance. It was as calm as the surface of a lake. The panicked fishermen felt warmth in the calm seawater. How could they not know that someone was helping them? These fishermen were all overjoyed and hurriedly swam in the sea. Some struggled to get on the ship, and some were busy rescuing others. Their swimming ability was excellent, and now that the wind and waves were calm, to them, it wasn't much different from flat ground. Although everyone couldn't get on the ship for a while, it was only a matter of time before they were all rescued. Xiaohua released his divine sense and knew that all the fishermen, including those who were frozen and fell into the sea, were swimming on the surface of the sea. Only then did he feel relieved and had time to observe everyone else. When he looked around and saw Zhang Qingxiao, his eyes unconsciously shrank, and his heart jumped. Heavenly Devil Sect Master? Why is he here? However, where his divine sense passed, Zhang Qingxiao wasn't there at all. Why is it Heavenly Devil Sect again? Didn't that cultivator say it was a mortal music sect? Xiaohua was slightly surprised, and then he understood. Presumably, this was Heavenly Devil Sect using Immortal Music Sect's name to do some shady business here. This guy's magic power and divine ability seemed to be much stronger than the last time I saw him. This young master actually can't see his cultivation level. It seems this guy's progress is even greater than this young master's. Xiaohua pondered. Last time, there was a Devil Sect's formation, and this time, it took a long time to set it up. Moreover, he also has 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators as helpers. This matter is somewhat troublesome. Just as Xiaohua was thinking, Bai Min, who was fleeing earlier, sensed the movement here. He saw the power of Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal, and he himself was being pressured by that cultivator, so he had no choice but to turn around and return. He shouted loudly, "Fellow Taoist, help me!" Seeing this, the cultivator chasing Bai Min's face changed dramatically, and his flying speed slowed down slightly, secretly looking at Zhang Qingxiao. Hey, why did fellow Taoist come back? Xiaohua glanced at Bai Min and said, if you left, you would have left. Now that you've come back, not only will you drag I down, you'll also lose your life. Bai Min cupped his hands and said, I am Bai Min from Silicon Island. Obviously, Bai Min also just saw Zhang Qingxiao, and at the same time, he also discovered the strangeness that his divine sense couldn't see. Unconsciously, his complexion was the same as the cultivator chasing him, incomparably pale. That's right, Xiaohua was only one person, and looking at his appearance, he was only an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Although his magic weapon was powerful, how could it be compared to a cultivator whose divine sense couldn't see and whose magic technique couldn't sense cultivation? Wasn't he just trying to find a doctor when he was sick? Moreover, Xiaohua's words had a hidden meaning. Although Bai Min looked impetuous, he still muddled his way to the middle stage of foundation establishment in Guihe High. So how could he not understand the meaning in Xiaohua's words? He immediately understood that his escape was deliberately done by these cultivators, and it was a part of their plan. He was so stupid to see Xiaohua, this straw, and actually walked right into their trap. They couldn't let him go even if they wanted to. Bai Min regretted it so much that he wanted to slap himself. You're actually quite smart. You actually saw the flaw in it with a glance, Zhang Qingxiao said warmly, as if he was giving pointers to a junior. Not at all. Fellow Taoist has always been far-sighted and strategizing. Since I've seen fellow Taoist once and experienced fellow Taoist methods, how could I not know? Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. Looking left and right, he carefully answered, Fellow Taoist? Ha ha ha. Zhang Qingxiao faced the sky and laughed heartily. He pointed his hand and said, Xiaohua, the first time I saw you, you seem to have let your fellow disciples escape in order to save them. You were originally the ones who could escape the most, but you fell behind. If I didn't intend to let you go, I'm afraid you wouldn't have escaped so easily, right? And today, you still have this kind of kindness and soft-hearted heart. -8. Chapter 21:38. Even now, you're still concealing my identity. Do you think I'll let this boorish person escape? Hee hee. Let me see. Your magic treasure has actually been repaired a bit. It's even more powerful than before. However, this magic treasure isn't protecting you right now, but instead protecting some vulgar people who are worse than pigs and dogs. You are really a good person, Zhang Qingxiao said disdainfully. Sect master? Bai Min heard and couldn't help but be stunned. He really couldn't figure out which sect Zhang Qingxiao was the sect master of. Xiaohua ignored Zhang Qingxiao's sarcasm and looked at the fishermen who were saving themselves under the cloud-suppressing seal. He said with a smile, Sect master actually still remembers me. It's really an honor. As for what I do, that's my business. It has nothing to do with your heavenly demonic sect. Heavenly demonic sect? You're the heavenly demonic sect. Bai Min suddenly realized and pointed at Zhang Qingxiao with a trembling finger. My islands have never interacted with your heavenly demonic sect. Why did you scheme to harm us? Who knew that Zhang Qingxiao simply ignored Bai Min and still looked at Xiaohua thoughtfully. She shook her head and said, I've thought for a long time, but I still can't figure out why fellow Taoist Xiao is doing this. Since you can't figure it out, then so be it. People who walk different paths can't work together. Xiaohua said coldly, That's right. These words are wonderful. People who walk different paths can't work together. Zhang Qingxiao clapped and laughed. You're the Tao, I'm the devil. Naturally, it's different. Immediately, Zhang Qingxiao seemed to have realized something and pointed at her nose. You and I can be considered old acquaintances, but I forgot to tell you. My surname is Zhang. And Xiaohua waited for a moment, but seeing that Zhang Qingxiao didn't continue, he could only cup his hands and say, So it's Sect Master Zhang. I just don't know why you don't listen to the name when you have the surname. Hiding your head and tail isn't what a real man does. Ha ha ha. Real man? I've never claimed to be a real man. Zhang Qingxiao flicked her sleeves and said, What I want to do is also not what a real man does. As for my name, it won't be too late to mention it after you defeat my 5 subordinates. Go, kill Xiaohua. Zhang Qingxiao turned hostile as soon as she said so, and she immediately ordered 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators. Yes, sect master. The 5 of them didn't dare to hesitate. They looked at each other and rubbed their hands together. Each of them emitted a water-blue brilliance and rushed into the 5 black holes. Who? A muffled sound rang out. It seemed like the awakening of a hibernating ice dragon. 5 sparkling and translucent ice pillars rushed out from the 5 black holes and smashed towards Xiaohua. Bai Min was close to Xiaohua. He saw that the ice dragon was like a real dragon, possessing a terrifying might. Moreover, wherever the ice dragon passed, the air would be frozen. A huge force pressed down from afar, completely imprisoning him and Xiao Hua. Bai Min did not dare to be negligent and hurriedly flew to the side. The ice dragon did not care about Bai Min and completely sealed off Xiao Hua's surroundings. Ha ha ha, I'm afraid that just relying on something like this won't be a problem for me. Xiao Hua laughed heartily. Similarly, he also rubbed his hands together. Several streaks of green and red light flew out. They were precisely the fire threads of the Samadhi true fire that were like 5 small snakes. At this time, the fire threads in Xiao Hua's hands were vivid and lifelike. They had a snake head and a snake body, but their features were not clear. Go! Xiao Hua raised his arms, and 5 fire snakes roared as they rushed towards the 5 ice dragons. In a moment, they collided. Hiss! Bai Min, who was not far away, saw this and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The fire snakes and ice dragons collided, but there wasn't much of a sound. However, the strange thing was that the thin fire snakes were not annihilated by the huge size of the ice dragons. Instead, when the two came into contact, they immediately ignited the ice dragons and quickly burned towards the back of the ice dragons. In addition to the fact that the Samadhi true fire was not afraid of this ice magic, more importantly, Bai Min had already seen that the magic power contained in the fire snakes was far from what the ice dragons could compare to. In other words, Xiao Hua's magic power far surpassed his opponent. No, it was far beyond his opponent and magic formation. If Bai Min could understand, how could Zhang Qingxiao and the others not understand? Hee, it's getting more and more interesting. The smile on Zhang Qingxiao's face became wider, and hatred flashed in her smile. She secretly said, "Little junior brother, you actually have the cultivation of late-stage foundation establishment? It's only been a few years. If you didn't get some benefits from me, Shang Huoming, how could you cultivate so fast? If it wasn't related to me, Shang Huoming, how could you improve so much?" Idiot! Zhang Qingxiao's eyes flashed, and she waved her big sleeve. 5 rays of light flew out and hit the ice dragons at the roots, cutting them off and preventing the fire snakes from continuing to burn. Other than fighting against ice, you don't know anything else? When the 5 cultivators heard this, they immediately flew up from their original positions and clapped their hands. 3 magic tools and 2 magic treasures were raised in the air. Ha ha, since ancient times, fire has been able to subdue ice. How about I try it today? Xiao Hua waved his hand again and dozens of fireball talismans and fireball techniques were shot out, hitting a range of 100 feet. Humph! Zhang Qingxiao sneered. Since ancient times, evil can't prevail over good. I'd like to see who will have the last laugh. As she spoke, Zhang Qingxiao waved her hand and took out the blood-red flag again. It shook slightly, and this time it was even more powerful. A few faint wisps of blood-red light that were almost inaudible flew into the air and formed a net of blood threads. The net of blood threads directly covered the fireballs that Xiao Hua used his magic power to create one by one. Xiao Hua's fireballs were mixed with true Samadhi fire. Others were helpless against it, but when they fell into the net of blood, they were immediately and silently extinguished. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was not surprised. The Devil Sect's methods had always been unexpected. His true Samadhi fire last time seemed to have no effect. However, seeing Zhang Qingxiao extinguish the true Samadhi fire so easily, Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed. Clearly, Zhang Qingxiao's progress in cultivation was also beyond his expectations. Go! Xiao Hua paid a bit of attention to Zhang Qingxiao and didn't pay much attention to the attacks of the 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators. With a wave of his hand, the soaring dragon shears flew out. A magnificent golden light flashed within 100 zhang radius. Xing 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 sounds rang out. 3 magical artifacts that had just gathered the spiritual energy of the water element of heaven and earth were sliced apart by the soaring dragon shears. The other 2 magical artifacts were also knocked flying into the air. The 5 balls of light that had just condensed were instantly dispersed. Wonderful! The 5 middle foundation establishment cultivators turned pale with fright. Just as they were thinking about how to deal with it, they heard Zhang Qingxiao clap her hands and laugh. Xiao Hua, I've really underestimated you. I thought that having a late foundation establishment cultivation was already pretty good, but I didn't expect you to reach the peak of the late foundation establishment stage. Moreover, you can control 2 magic treasures at the same time. It's really wonderful." As she spoke, Zhang Qingxiao clapped her hands and the bright scenic bell flew out from her storage bag. This bright scenic bell was clearly different from the first time Xiaohua saw it. Unexpectedly, it also had a dazzling golden brilliance, and that brilliance was like a golden lotus. But as soon as the golden lotus came out of the storage bag, it immediately produced an enormous suction force. The nearby spiritual energy of heaven and earth flocked towards it, giving rise to a small whirlwind. Hiss! Seeing this, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. The might of this bright scenic bell's magic treasure was clearly more powerful than the cloud-suppressing seal. Moreover, that brilliance had already taken shape, and the degree of completeness of the magic treasure was also higher than the cloud-suppressing seal. Although his soaring dragon shears were powerful, it was also damaged. He didn't know if it could match up. Then let this Xiao experience sect Master Zhang's methods. Xiaohua didn't say anything further and urged his magic power. The soaring dragon shears flashed with golden light and flew towards the bright scenic bell. With a dang sound, it seemed that the ice shards in the air were swaying. Xiaohua immediately felt his vision blur for a moment, and the soaring dragon shears' golden light immediately stopped. Quick! Xiaohua was greatly alarmed and slightly shook his head. He felt that his head was as heavy as 1,000 caddies. He didn't dare to be the slightest bit negligent and immediately urged the soul-piercing technique. Zhang Qingxiao's Naiwen palace suddenly felt like it was being pierced. He couldn't help but hold his head. His body also wanted to fall a little bit. And taking advantage of this moment, the soaring dragon shears swiftly flew over. With a schwa sound, like the sound of silk being cut, the bright scenic bell's golden brilliance and the lotus-like luster within the brilliance were all cut into 2 halves. Quick! Zhang Qingxiao reluctantly endured the pain in his Naiwen palace and pointed his finger. The bright scenic bell's brilliance greatly increased, and the brilliance flocked over to block the soaring dragon shears. That golden light took the form of a faint lotus and surrounded Zhang Qingxiao, the 2 martial brothers of the past. The moment they met in life and death. When the lotus had just surrounded Zhang Qingxiao waved his hand and the flag that he had previously put away in his sleeve waved again. The bewitching blood-red color appeared again, and unexpectedly, it transformed into a large rock-like fog and pounced towards Xiaohua. "Granny, you have quite a lot of secret techniques. I'll let you see what the secret techniques of the devil sect are," Zhang Qingxiao said, not venting his hatred. "Don't you know? Secret techniques? I'd like to see who's stronger." Seeing the blood-red rock, Xiaohua was somewhat hesitant. Needless to say, this was definitely the method of the devil sect. If he had the mighty Vajra Dharma body, he would be able to break it. But right now, his Buddhist Dharma body was gone, and only the Phoenix Dharma body was left. He didn't know whether it would be useful or not. But how could Zhang Qingxiao give him time to think? Although the rock didn't have any power, a dense, bloody, and austere aura had already enveloped Xiaohua. "Rise!" Xiaohua's body shook, and a phoenix cry rang out. The Phoenix Dharma body rushed out, and the power of heaven and earth filled the entire area. Zhang Qingxiao was completely dumbstruck. However, Zhang Qingxiao's face instantly revealed a sinister expression, and a real killing intent arose. He sneered and said, "Xiaohua, which cultivation sect are you from? You actually have the true blood of the phoenix. This young master is a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, not some cultivation sect." Xiaohua was somewhat baffled. "This young master has already told you. Why are you so interested in this young master's background?" Instantly, Xiaohua's face also revealed a sinister expression. His eyes slightly narrowed, and he secretly said, "Could it be that this guy is related to the cultivator who sealed me?" Immediately, Xiaohua's killing intent also rose. Right now, he still didn't have the strength to break the seal. He absolutely couldn't let Zhang Qingxiao expose his strength. -8. Chapter 2139. Looks like I have to use the spirit fire. Xiao Hua's phoenix body fluttered. The wind on his wings faintly sounded. His sharp phoenix claws could actually tear a piece of the blood-colored rock, steadily gaining the upper hand. But if Xiao Hua wants to kill Zhang Qingxiao, it's absolutely impossible without the spirit fire. Xiao Hua's figure slightly swayed. The magic power in his whole body surged. He was already prepared. The bright thunder escape was about to be activated. That wisp of spirit fire already passed out from his Buddhist heart. As long as he gets close to Zhang Qingxiao, he will definitely spit out the spirit fire without hesitation. He believes that under the scarlet spirit fire, Zhang Qingxiao will definitely turn into ashes. Zhang Qingxiao's eyes also emitted a cold light. He had already regarded Xiao Hua as a murderer who harbored evil intentions. Zhang Qingxiao also activated his secret technique. All the blood in his body rushed to his head. The bright scenic bell shook violently, and the invisible sound waves gradually expanded. Based on Xiao Hua's reaction just now, Zhang Qingxiao also has the confidence that her full strength attack can make Xiao Hua instantly lose consciousness and kill him in one strike. The two people's killing intent suddenly appeared. The whole place sensed it. Not only was Bai Min shocked, even the 5 Middle Stage Foundation establishment cultivators and the dozens of aura-refining disciples scattered around the sea panicked. They have never seen the sect master with such great fanfare. It seems the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was about to be ignited. A real biting cold wind came out. At this moment, there was suddenly a change in Xiao Hua's storage pouch. A dark green brilliance unexpectedly flew out from his storage pouch, straight into the air, and immediately rushed to the right side of the sky. And immediately afterwards, a tyrannical divine sense swept over like a waterfall. Who? Zhang Qingxiao was shocked. This divine sense is not something she can compare to. This person's divine sense is far superior to hers. Nyang Nyang. Xiao Hua stared blankly again, then immediately became overjoyed. That dark green brilliance was the token that the mysterious Nyang Nyang gave him, telling him to check it after he built his foundation. After Xiao Hua built his foundation, it's not that he didn't think about it, but because he had to accompany Xue Xue to gain experience, he didn't have the time. So he temporarily put it in his storage pouch, waiting to send Xue Xue back to the mountain. Who knew that he would actually meet the Nyang Nyang at this time? Seeing Xiao Hua's joy, how could Zhang Qingxiao not know the severity of the situation? She no longer cared about fighting with Xiao Hua and waved her hand, ordering, "Let's go." Yes. Everyone bowed and waved their hands, hurriedly tidying up. Sect leader Zhang, don't you think it's too late to leave now? How could Xiao Hua let Zhang Qingxiao go? He activated his avatar and flew towards Zhang Qingxiao. His sharp phoenix claws flickered and blocked Xiao Hua's attack. If I want to leave, who can stop me? Zhang Qingxiao smiled maliciously. She raised her hand and flicked her finger. Dang! A bell rang. The phoenix battle form trembled rapidly and fell from the sky. Xiao Hua felt the space around him shaking again. He couldn't stand steadily. Qi. A clear and melodious sound rang out. The sound penetrated the bell and resounded in everyone's ears. Xiao Hua's ears immediately became clear, and his avatar also stabilized. Then, he withdrew it back into his physical body in an extremely dispirited manner. Can I stop you? Rainbow-like brilliance flashed in the distance and landed in the sky above everyone. The Empress revealed her figure and coldly said, Junior Zhang Qingxiao of Heavenly Demon Sect greets Senior. Seeing this, Zhang Qingxiao didn't dare to be negligent. She pointed at the bright scenic bell, and it immediately flew into her hand. She then bowed and greeted. Oh, so it's a sect leader. The Empress's beautiful eyes swept over and said, No wonder your tone is so arrogant. Hee, Xiao Hua. Dyer's cute appearance appeared beside the Empress. She looked at Xiao Hua and blinked her eyes. However, she didn't say anything. Zhang Qingxiao. Zhang Qingxiao. Zhang Qingxiao. Hearing Zhang Qingxiao announce her name in front of the Empress, this name was like thunder in Xiao Hua's mind. It was even more powerful than the bright scenic bell from before. Isn't this the name of second senior brother? This guy. Could it be second senior brother? How is that possible? Although second senior brother flaunts himself as outstanding and elegant, he's still far from this guy. Moreover, although second senior brother's corpse isn't seen and we can't determine whether he's dead or alive, master and eldest senior brother are both dead. How can second senior brother live alone? Even if second senior brother is alive, it's impossible for him to have such a high cultivation. A gold core cultivator. Ah, master. That's what he dreams of. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's eyes were moist. He didn't care about Dyer's appearance. I don't dare. Zhang Qingxiao smiled apologetically and said, Junior is only talking to Xiao Hua. Senior is a cultivator with profound magic power. Junior is not your opponent. I absolutely don't dare to say these words in front of you. What are you waiting for? The Empress did not take Zhang Qingxiao seriously at all. As her divine sense swept over, she saw dozens of disciples frozen in the ice layer. Senior, please no. Zhang Qingxiao hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, Junior was looking for something here. Who would have thought that these cultivators would see it? Junior was afraid of leaking the news, so I had no choice but to. Senior. Seeing this, how could Bai Min let go of this opportunity? He hurriedly stepped forward and said, This guy is the sect master of the heavenly demon sect. He intended to provoke the conflict between our outer islands and Ming country's cultivation sections. That's why he set up an ambush and used the name of a mortal music sect to kill us outer islands disciples. He even wanted to let Junior escape and spread false news. If fellow Taoist Xiao didn't appear in time, this thief's plan would have succeeded. Senior should know that if our outer islands fought with Ming country's cultivation sects, tens of thousands of cultivators would die. Senior, you must uphold justice for us. Don't let this bastard escape. The Empress's expression didn't change at all. She said indifferently, I also don't know the art of divination. Who knows who is telling the truth? It's normal for cultivators to fight each other. How can one cultivate without dying? Senior's words are correct. Zhang Qingxiao rolled her eyes and said, Junior is looking for Qiu Yinlu. How is it the ambush that this guy said? Oh, Qiu Yinlu? The Empress seemed to have heard of this name before. She asked curiously, how did Devil Monarch Qi Feng's weapon end up in Donrain continent? Empress knows of true Monarch Qi Feng? Zhang Qingxiao's expression changed slightly and immediately said respectfully, how could the Empress answer him? She said indifferently, if it's for this weapon, it's normal for you to seal the news. However, do you think that this Foundation establishment cultivator would know of your devil cultivator's weapon? Hee, it's better to be safe than sorry. Zhang Qingxiao smiled apologetically. In order to not leak any information, Junior can only do this. And that's reasonable. The Empress's brows didn't crease as she said it as a matter of course. Seeing this, Zhang Qingxiao smiled apologetically again. Since Senior has already distinguished right from wrong, then can Junior leave? Senior, you must not let him go. His hands have taken the lives of many cultivators. Bai Min said anxiously. -8. Chapter 2140. The Empress glanced at him and said with a smile, What does the lives of cultivators like you have to do with me? This? Bai Min was flabbergasted and didn't know how to answer. Thank you, Senior. Zhang Qingxiao cupped her hands and was about to fly away when the Empress said coldly, Did I allow you to leave? This? Zhang Qingxiao was also hesitant, not knowing what the Empress meant. Xiao Hua, what are you doing? Dai naturally couldn't let the Empress speak and asked curiously, Why aren't you speaking after seeing the Empress? Hee. Xiao Hua collected his thoughts and smiled apologetically. Junior suddenly thought of something else. Please forgive me, Empress. Humph. You're already at Foundation establishment. Did you forget the Empress's words? If it weren't for this servant accompanying the Empress, you wouldn't have sent out this Jasper Caltrop. Dai scolded as she stole a glance at the Empress. Xiao Hua was anxious and hurriedly bowed. I'll let the Empress know. However, without waiting for Xiao Hua to finish, the Empress waved her hand and said coldly, I'm only asking you, what happened here? Don't say anything else. Yes. Xiao Hua knew that the Empress was angry and hurriedly looked around. Junior also doesn't know what happened. But Junior saw that the fishermen on these two ships were about to be buried in the belly of the fish, and their relatives at the seaside were grieving inconsolably. Junior couldn't bear to see such a tragic thing happen. So Junior came to intervene, wanting to save these fishermen. As for what those two families are doing, Junior really doesn't know, and also really doesn't want to know. These lowly people? The Empress had long seen the fishing boat under the protection of Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal and was very surprised. You want to save these lowly people? I'll let the Empress know, Junior really does think so. The life and death of those two families has nothing to do with Junior. Xiao Hua said without hesitation. For these lowly people, you can take action, but you don't care about the life and death of these cultivators. The imperial concubine chuckled. Although this concubine doesn't know what you're thinking and doesn't understand what you're thinking, this concubine will still go with the flow. As she spoke, the Empress waved the sleeve of her palace dress. A cloud surged and flew under the cloud-suppressing seal. It ignored the light of the cloud-suppressing seal and swept up the ship, the fishermen floating around, and even the wreckage of the other ship. In an instant, it flew to the shore. Seeing such a divine ability, Xiao Hua's eyes unconsciously lit up. If he had such a great ability, why would he need to expend so much effort? Next, Xiao Hua pointed his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal, soaring dragon shears, and other items flew back into his hand. He bowed and said, Junior thanks the Empress for her great kindness on behalf of these fishermen. What are you talking about? Weren't you the one who protected them? Although the imperial consort's tone was indifferent, it was clear that her anger had dissipated somewhat. She pointed at Zhang Qingxiao and said, This person is a little strange. Even this consort can't see through him. Do you think this consort killed him? Or should we let him go? Zhang Qingxiao's face instantly paled. Xiao Hua's heart was beating wildly. If it was before he knew Zhang Qingxiao's name, he would definitely clap his hands and cheer without hesitation. After all, he didn't have a good impression of the heavenly demon sect. But after knowing Zhang Qingxiao's name, his first reaction was that self-righteous second senior brother of his. How could he let someone with the same name die in front of his eyes? That's right, if this Zhang Qingxiao isn't that Zhang Qingxiao, then why did he keep inquiring about my background? Why did he let me go when he could clearly trap me last time? Xiao Hua suddenly thought of the first time he met Zhang Qingxiao and what Zhang Qingxiao asked. But if he is second senior brother, why did he kill me when we met this time? Do I want his life or not? But if I don't want his life, then I'll miss this good opportunity today. If I want to kill this guy in the future, I'm afraid it'll be extremely difficult. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment. Zhang Qingxiao narrowed his eyes and coldly looked at Xiao Hua. He knew clearly in his heart that as long as he told the truth, Xiao Hua would definitely either kill him or let him go. Since he couldn't be sure of Xiao Hua's background, what was the difference between telling the truth and telling the truth? However, facing Xiao Hua who couldn't be sure of his background, Zhang Qingxiao absolutely couldn't tell the truth. Just Xiao Hua alone could force him to reveal the truth. How could he meet gods and kill gods, meet ghosts and kill ghosts? Suddenly, Xiao Hua laughed involuntarily and said to the Empress, Empress asked the wrong person. Didn't Junior say it already? Junior only cares about the life and death of these fishermen. The life and death of these people have nothing to do with Junior. Empress can decide for yourself. That's true. The Empress also laughed. What does the life and death of you cultivators have to do with me? As she spoke, she flung her sleeve and brought Xiao Hua along. The three of them flew up and quickly flew to the shore. They ignored Zhang Qingxiao and the others. Sect Master. The 5 Middle Stage Foundation establishment cultivators looked at Bai Min and whispered, What should we do? Go. How could Zhang Qingxiao dare to make any other plans in front of the Empress? He hastily waved his hand and brought the disciples to flee in panic. Before Zhang Qingxiao left, he still fiercely glared at Xiao Hua who had already landed on the reef in the distance. After Zhang Qingxiao and the others of the demonic sect left, Bai Min was somewhat dumbfounded. According to his thinking, Xiao Hua or the Empress would at least save the dozens of people frozen under the ice. After all, for Xiao Hua, it was just a matter of a word. For the Empress, who seemed to have boundless magic power, it was also a piece of cake. However, he didn't expect that the two of them would throw away their responsibilities and simply ignore him. Min activated his ardent pearl and barely managed to melt some of the ice. However, the ice was so hard that it was condensed by the magic weapons of the 5 Middle Stage Foundation establishment cultivators. His ardent pearl really couldn't do anything. In desperation, Min could only look at Xiaohua again. That's right, how could Xiaohua, who was kind enough to save the fisherman, ignore these cultivators who were about to die? Min thought for a moment, then pitifully and dispiritedly flew to the left of Xiaohua and the others. He obediently stood there with his hands by his side and didn't say anything. As for those fishermen, they were really sad and happy at the same time. They originally thought that they were going to be swallowed by the ice water and die a violent death. However, they didn't expect that Xiaohua would actually come out and stabilize the entire fishing boat with a cloud-suppressing seal, blocking all danger outside the brilliance of the cloud-suppressing seal. Then, like a dream, the entire fishing boat flew up and landed on the shore in the blink of an eye. It landed in front of the women and children who had almost become orphans and widows. It was hard to tell whether they were happy or sad. For a moment, the entire fishing village was in an uproar. Everyone counted their harvest and sent the women and children back to the fishing boat. A few slightly older old men, who were probably the leaders of the fishing boats, trembled as they came to the reef where Xiaohua and the others were. They also obediently knelt on the beach and pitifully looked at the Empress and the others. Xiaohua followed the Empress and landed on the tall cliff. He pointed at Shui and said, "Empress, that's Junior's junior sister." "Oh, you have a junior sister? Didn't you say you were a loose cultivator?" Dyer blinked, but then she looked at Xiaohua's spirit storage bag and asked, "That, little Martin? Your child, Xiaohuang, is he dead?" Dyer's eyes were big and full of doubts. Her expression was somewhat unbearable, as if she was extremely afraid that Xiaohua would say some bad news. Xiaohua patted his spirit storage bag, but in reality, he used his primordial spirit to take out Xiaohuang. He smiled and said, "Dyer, Xiaohuang is very good. He has already completely recovered. However, he is now sleeping soundly again." Dyer happily clapped her hands and jumped up. She smiled and said, "As expected, little Martin is really fine. Empress, this servant said that little Martin is at his mother's place and his heart will be at ease. He will definitely be fine." The Empress looked at Dyer's happiness and also smiled faintly. Dyer unrestrainedly reached out and wanted to pick up Xiaohuang. At this time, Xiaohuang slightly opened his eyes and looked at the scenery around him with surprise. He looked at Xiaohua and then at Dyer. Apparently, Xiaohuang still remembered Dyer. He only slightly waved his tail and didn't have any reaction. He closed his eyes again. "Little Martin, why are you so sleepy? When Dyer saw you, you were already sleeping. Why are you still sleeping now?" Dyer lovingly stroked Xiaohuang's fur and said, "Yes, Empress. Why is Xiaohuang always sleeping?" Xiaohua also asked softly. He should be trying to distract the Empress' anger. Hearing Xiaohua's words, the Empress restrained her smile and said indifferently, "The advancement of spirit beasts is different from that of cultivators. They repair and evolve their bodies while sleeping. Don't you cultivators of the human realm also heal through closed-door cultivation? It's the same principle." Then, the Empress looked at Dyer and said with a smile, "Don't talk about little Martin. Back then, you..." But halfway through, she stopped. Her face showed a strange expression and said, "Dyer, give little Martin to this Empress." Yes, Dyer was a bit reluctant, but she still gave it to the Empress. The Empress took Xiaohuang and inserted a 3-colored light into it. Then, she closed her eyes again. After a while, her face showed a dignified expression. "Xiaohua, what did little Martin eat after waking up?" the Empress suddenly asked. Xiaohua didn't dare to hide it and told her about Yi Yuan and Jindan. The Empress thought for a moment and handed Xiaohuang to Dyer. She frowned and said, "This Xiaohuang of yours is strange. Why does he call you mother? Where did you get?" Speaking up to here, The Empress glanced at Xiao Hua's Naiwan palace and said lightly, "You still don't remember? I'll let the Empress know." Xiao Hua nodded. "Junior already knows that my Naiwan palace is sealed, and my Dantian is also sealed. As for my memory, I still haven't recovered." And the Empress looked at Xiao Hua with a bit of surprise and said, "I didn't expect you to build your foundation so quickly and reach the middle stage of foundation establishment so quickly. You were able to detect the seal 100 years earlier than this Empress expected." Xiao Hua. -8. Chapter 2141. Xiao Hua knew that the Empress was asking and blushed. Just as he was about to speak, asked curiously, "Empress, this servant doesn't understand." The Empress glared at Dyer and said, "Speak. What exactly is little Martin?" Dyer looked innocent. Dyer has been thinking about it for so many years. Seeing that the Empress seemed to have discovered something, Dyer couldn't help but ask, "Can't you ask later?" The Empress's tone was slightly dignified. "This servant doesn't dare." Dyer's face also turned cold, as if the Empress had discovered her thoughts, and she lowered her head slightly. You girl. This Empress brought you here to experience emotions. You may have some gains. Don't try to be smart." The Empress lightly warned. "Yes, this servant understands." Dyer hurriedly replied. The Empress looked at Little Yellow and said, "This Empress is still somewhat confused, but this Empress is basically certain that this little Martin is not little Martin. As for what it is only a guess. Perhaps it is the Truth Listener beast." Truth Listener? Dyer heard this name and trembled, throwing Little Yellow out of her hand. Fortunately, Xiao Hua was beside her and reached out to catch it. He seemed to have seen this name from somewhere before, but he didn't have any impression of it for now. Truth Listener. It's the legendary, strange beast that can expel evil, distinguish right from wrong, and understand the secrets of heaven and earth. It's born to suck in ghosts and souls, and it's born to feed on them. The Empress enunciated each word clearly. Hiss. When Xiao Hua heard this, he immediately understood where he had heard the name Truth Listener from. Wasn't it the inheritance of ghost cultivators? Truth Listener was the natural nemesis of ghost cultivators. It specialized in eating ghosts. Every malicious ghost and Ghost King was Truth Listener's food. Moreover, Truth Listener could see the 9 underworlds. All the dark secrets of heaven and earth could not escape its eyes and ears. However, according to what this Empress knows, little Martin is still young. Whether it can evolve into Truth Listener depends on its luck. The Empress said again, "This strange beast is a heavenly wonder, and it is even rejected by heaven and earth. It has encountered many disasters in its life. If it is not careful, it will die. However, what puzzles me is that if little Martin is Truth Listener, I should have been able to detect it the last time. Why am I only able to detect it now? Furthermore, little Martin's form is completely different from the Harkins when it was young." Dyer's panic had yet to subside. She fearfully looked at Xiao Huang and Xiao Hua's hand and said with a trembling voice, "Nyang, Nyang Nyang, since it's a vicious beast, there must be something unusual about it. It's normal that Nyang Nyang doesn't know about it." "Haha, Dyer, you don't have to be so scared. The Harkin may be infamous for its ferocity, but how could it possibly harm you when you were young? If you befriend him now, who knows, he might be able to protect you in the future?" The Empress said with a smile. Her smile was so charming that even the sea breeze became gentle. "Really?" Daphne asked in disbelief. She had almost forgotten that she was holding little Huang in her arms. "Well, don't forget that you saved his life," Xiao Hua said as he handed Goldie over. "Didn't he let you hug him when he saw you just now?" "Hee, that's right." Daphne smiled, but there was still some fear in her eyes. Her arms were a little hesitant. Xiao Hua smiled and placed Xiao Hua in her hands. If you can't hug him properly now, you won't have the chance to hug him when he grows up." "Okay." Daphne took a deep breath and took little Huang. Unlike before, there was a great deal of surprise in her eyes. After Daphne hugged little Huang, Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "Junior was just about to explain to Nyang Nyang. It's fine. I don't need any explanation." The Empress waved her hand indifferently. I just casually picked up this little marten that looks like the Harkin. It can be considered a good karma. It has nothing to do with you. Haha, Junior came out to train this time to accompany Junior's sister. Xiao Hua knew that if he didn't explain, the Empress wouldn't forgive him. He looked at Xue Xue, who was sitting on the beach in the distance. His eyes showed gentleness as he said with a smile, Junior didn't want to build his foundation, but under a coincidence, he suddenly built his foundation. It was really out of Junior's expectations. However, because Junior's sister still hasn't built her foundation, Junior has always been accompanying her. She said she wanted to come to Guehisi to see the sea. This Guehisi is so far away from the state of Shi, so Junior wanted to wait until I returned to the state of Shi from Guehisi before sending the message. Oh? The Empress was disdainful at first and didn't really take it to her ears. But at this time, she suddenly asked curiously, So, you also built your foundation during this training? You accompanied your junior sister out? Saying this, the Empress looked at Xue Xue. Junior doesn't dare to hide anything. Nyang Nyang, please investigate. I just built my foundation a few years ago. Xiao Hua couldn't say the specific number of years and quickly replied, Junior still hasn't returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Oh, you entered the Imperial Thunder Sect. The Empress said thoughtfully, your cultivation is really fast. In just a few years, you reached the middle stage of foundation establishment. Are you hiding your cultivation because you're afraid others will know? Hee, that's right. Seeing the Empress's question, Xiao Hua knew that the anger in her heart was slightly reduced. He smiled apologetically and said, when others see Junior's foundation establishment cultivation, they naturally think Junior is an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. If Junior reveals his skills, wouldn't that be a great advantage? Himph, you human cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent really have too many thoughts. If the Empress snorted coldly and said, if this Empress makes a move, regardless of whether you're at foundation establishment or chi refinement, you'll all be killed. How could there be any advantage to be taken? Yes, how can Junior compare to Senior? Xiao Hua smiled embarrassedly. Since you're accompanying your lover to travel the Dawn Rain continent, then this Empress's matter can't be considered too important. This Empress won't say any more. The Empress looked at Xiao Hua and Xue Xue with a trace of surprise in her eyes and sighed. Xiao Hua hurriedly bowed. Thank you, Empress. No need. The Empress still waved her hand. What orders does Empress have? Xiao Hua said again, although Junior's strength is weak, if Junior can help, I'll definitely do my best. The Empress nodded and said, actually, this Empress isn't a cultivator of the Dawn Rain continent. Oh? When Xiao Hua heard the Empress say cultivator of the human realm of the Dawn Rain continent, he felt that something was wrong. Now that he heard it, he somewhat understood and asked curiously, then Empress, where are you from? This Empress is also not a cultivator. The Empress shook her head and said, this Empress is from the 10,000 Demon Realm. 10,000 Demon Realm? It was obviously the first time Xiao Hua heard this name. His face revealed astonishment. What is that place? Hee, the 10,000 Demon Realm is the same place as the Dawn Rain continent. The Empress smiled and said, it's just that it's full of demons, not humans. And this Empress is also not a human. -8.